would like to call our public hearing of City Council for Monday, March 22nd to order, and we'll open the public hearing, and I'll ask our corporate officer to read aloud the notice of our public hearing. Sorry, Brenda.
Good morning. This public hearing is being held to hear from anyone that may be affected by the proposed amendments to both the city's official community plan bylaw and zoning bylaw. The purpose of OCP Amendment Bylaw Number 4497 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw Number 4498 is to amend the land use designation of specified portions of Chamberlain Park from parks, natural areas, and trails to low-density residential. This is to allow for the consolidation of 190 meters squared of land with 1824 Willowbrook Crescent and 206.95 meters squared with 10737 Poplar Crescent. The zoning amendment would rezone the same areas of Chamberlain Park from P1 Parks and Natural Areas to RS1 Residential Single Detached.
Thank you, Brenda. And with that, we'll ask if you can give a verbal report on the public consultations held to amend the land use designation of Chamberlain Park.
Sure. There were multiple public consultations held regarding Chamberlain Park encroachments, including 3 back in 2017 and 1 in 2019. The most recent public consultation held on October 5th, 2020, was to consider the OCP zoning amendments for the first 10 purchasers, and they received no feedback, and there was no comments received regarding this notice.
Thank you, Brenda. They say anything worthwhile is a journey, not a sprint, and so we're on the journey.
It has been a journey.
Thank you for that. And any correspondence or delegations?
There was none received. No.
Thank you. For a first time, then, we'll call for any comments. And for a second time, comments. And for a third time, if there are any comments. Thank you. So we'll close the public hearing, and at this time I will call to order our regular meeting of City Council with a committee of the whole for Monday, March 22nd. And our first order this morning is our delegations, and we have a delegation this morning regarding a proclamation on World Water Day. And on behalf of Catherine Henry, our watershed coordinator, and Jennifer Saxton, our watershed technician, I'd like to read the proclamation. And I think I'm going to sit to do it because it's a little bit easier for the microphone. Whereas an international day to celebrate fresh water was recommended at the 1992 United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, and the United Nations General Assembly responded by designating March 22, 1993 as the first World Water Day. And whereas International World Water Day is held annually on March 22nd as a means of focusing attention on the importance of fresh water and advocating for the sustainable management of freshwater resources. And whereas each year, World Water Day highlights a specific aspect of fresh water, with this year's theme being valuing water, the City of Dawson Creek invites the community to once again focus on the multi-dimensional values of water for households, food, culture, health, education, economics, and the integrity of our natural environment. Now, therefore, I do hereby proclaim March 22nd, 2021 as World Water Day, and encourage all residents in and around the surrounding community to show this world they care by conserving water. And there's the notification. We have our first sign-up. No, and so we do have, I see that Catherine and Jennifer, I believe, are joining us on Zoom, and so I'd like to turn it over to them if they would like to say a few words.
We do have a presentation trying to share screen. Been disabled. Tech assistance nearby?
Yeah, we're just going to work to share the screen now. There we are.
Okay, so does it see the slide, or do you see my notes?
Your sound was cutting out a bit.
Oh, now.
Sorry, it's still pretty choppy. So unfortunately, we're having trouble with your sound, and we've got the slides up on the screen, but as I say, the sound has been very choppy so far. Yeah, I think what we'll do is we apologize for the technology, and we will reschedule this so that we can have the presentation delivered to council at our next meeting, and we'll work on getting that fixed for you.
Okay.
So, so we're going to move to our next delegation 2.2, and we have Edward Stanford, local government consultant with urban systems, and we're going to get a verbal presentation on the public engagement for the redevelopment of the Rotary Lake site. And Ross, I'll get you to introduce Edward for us.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good morning. We have, the city has, in its 2021 capital budget, included completion of a redevelopment plan for the Rotary Lake site. The work will include public consultation, which will include the South Peace Mile Zero Park Society, Rotary clubs, and various stakeholders. We have engaged Urban Systems, and Edward Stanford is with us this morning. Urban will be conducting our public engagement piece for us. This morning, we have not started the public engagement process, but this morning is really to speak with council and to clearly understand council's directive with respect to repurposing of that site. The site itself is in a water plane. There have been some studies in the past. There is a spray park at the site. Do we continue with that particular spray park? Are we going to, will council consider an addition to that spray park? So this morning is really just to have Edward and myself just have some exchange with you, just so when we're developing the terms and conditions, the goals and objectives of the public consultation, we clearly understand council's direction. So without further ado, Edward is here to chat with us this morning.
Thank you, Ross. Welcome, Edward. Good morning. Thank you, Ross. Welcome, Edward.
Is he froze?
Oh my goodness.
Technology is not our friend today.
Not a great start. What's the internet? Hello? No. Too much snow last night.
Maybe we can go back to him once we get figured out.
So
When you hear me?
it's just now, Edward. Yeah, we're really having trouble with the technology in our internet here. So we're going to move on, and then if we can get our staff just to look at that and see if we'll get back to Edward and let him know as soon as we can. We'll amend the agenda to get him back in. Thank you. And our next delegation at 2.3 is set for 1 p.m. So we'll move to item 3, new councillor business. Anyone? Councillor Parslow?
I got into my old ways there. Yeah, I have a few things here. One matter relates to handicapped parking. I talked to staff, I think it was Friday. A rural resident who I know very well talked to me about a number of issues, and one of them was access to handicapped parking. And it's further questions. The issue is that many times the handicapped parking is being occupied at certain locations by people who do not have a handicapped parking sign, and he states that many of them seem to be young people. Initially I thought he was talking about our roads, but the concern is our food stores in town. Safeway, Super Value, Fit, whatever they call themselves here, and the Co-op. So in discussion with staff, I wasn't sure whether we have any jurisdiction around the occupying of handicap parking on private property. And so before I get back to this person, I wondered if staff had any comments about this, and maybe we could get hold of those various outlets and see how they enforce it. I just don't know. So I'd like, if I may, staff was informed about this topic. I'm not catching them by surprise. So.
All right. Thank you, and through you, Your Worship, as Councillor Parslow indicated, this is a private property issue. We have no jurisdiction on private property to deal with the handicap parking. We do on our streets where we see handicap, but it would be the responsibility of the owner of that business to deal with it, and they could, I'm going to assume, have an individual hired to look after that. It would be somewhat costly, I'm thinking, for them, but maybe a staff member could go out. It's unfortunate that you have people in our community, like many others, that seem to disregard that these are for people with disabilities, and they're put there for a reason, and it isn't for a young, strapping young lad to park so he's closer to the door. But yeah, because it's private property, the jurisdiction on enforcing that falls with the owner. So the mall, for instance, may look at entertaining something like that. But
Yeah.
Kevin, anything further? No?
Thanks, Blair.
Thank you. Second topic, just a report for NDIT. The meeting on Friday, there were 3 grants on the list that directly affect this community. The National Women's Under 18 Championship Marketing, a grant of $20,000 was applied for, and that was recommended for approval. The Sudeten Hall improvements, a grant of $47,670, was recommended by the group for approval. And one, a major grant, $300,000 for the indoor shooting range was also approved. So the big one will have to go forward to the overall governing body, but it's a formality, I think. So that's good news. So the Sudeten Hall work was weeping tile, was it not, and painting, siding, yeah. So that's good. And the hockey thing, if it happens, well, that's good as well. A couple of comments, if I may. Did I miss? Sorry if I'm providing entertainment as well.
The hockey thing, I just got a chuckle at that.
Okay. An interesting in the sharing that went on, as always goes on at these meetings, from the mayor of Fort St. John, they got my attention. They either are planning to or have a tax deferral bylaw to support businesses who are improving their facilities and their awnings and so on. You will know that the NDIT, there's a grant that the city gets. I think it's about $20,000 for that. But they try to incentivize it through a tax deferral bylaw. So that caught my attention. And again, I did talk to staff about that. That was a revelation to me, and I think it was to staff. Have you had a chance yet to do any research on that opportunity?
Through your worship, no, I've began looking into it after Friday when we spoke. A tax deferral, I know that we do have the ability for a business improvement district where you can have different, but I have to investigate this. I'm unaware that you can handpick businesses and give them a different tax treatment than anyone else. So
Yeah.
That catches me. Flavia, is there anything? Yeah, but we will follow through. But I'm quite confident in that you can't individually pick a certain business. Certainly a district you can set different rates for under a business improvement district, but we will get the answer for you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Finally, of course, the foundation, Fort St. John has established a foundation which will eventually handle all their, I believe, their grants and fees for services and stuff. But it's, I learned that Grand Prairie has such a foundation as well. And I wonder if that might be of some interest to the city. And that completes my report.
Thank you. And I think we, the city, are part of the Northeast Regional Foundation with Taylor, Poose, Dawson Creek, and Chetwynd, maybe? Yeah. Thank you for that. Good. And I appreciate the update on NDIT. That's really good to see that input to the community. Do we have, I saw Edward, are we ready for that, or do you want to, we're still working? Okay, so we'll carry on. Any other new councillor business? Thank you. We have minutes of our regular meeting of council for March 8th for adoption. Move, Councillor Kemp, second, Councillor Parslow. All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Was there any business arising out of any of the minutes for anyone? Thank you. Item 6, correspondence. 6.1, we have a letter from Crystal Hilton, Vice Chair of the School District, who's responded on behalf of the Board Chair as a result of a conflict in regards to our request that they review that transportation of students. Councillor Parslow?
Thank you. I move that we receive this as information.
Thank you. Second, Councillor Earl. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. 6.2, we have a letter from Will Cole Hamilton, a councillor from the city of Courtney, in regards for a request for support. Councillor Parslow?
Sorry, I should have turned it off. I do want to speak to this. but
Okay.
I don't want to make a motion about it.
So I need a motion.
Receive for information.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Brenda? Councillor, so go ahead.
Sorry, I just did not get the seconder for that motion.
Councillor Earl?
Thank you.
So, 6.3, we have a letter from the PACE BC Steering Committee, request for resolution of support for property assessed under the clean energy financing. Councillor Parslow.
I hesitate in here because I know we don't want to have things for discussion. But so I have so many questions about this matter that I don't believe staff is in any position to answer. And it really all stems from my concern for people who own their homes, who are seniors or on low incomes. And so I have, whilst I support many things to deal with climate issues, I'm having real problems with this particular item, right? And
So I think honestly, we have a motion that we either reject the request or approve the request, and then give that input into administration to ask those questions for a response following the motion that council either approves or rejects, but give you the opportunity to put that into a part of the request for your information.
so I'll make a motion.
Yep.
I move that we reject this request.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Earl, discussion? Councillor
speak to it?
Parslow?
Well, I empathize and support the concern around the need for reduction of emissions. But the way I'm reading this proposal, this would really be a heavy burden from the point of view of requiring people to reduce their emissions from their homes, even though they're suggesting that there'll be a financing would be available through this scheme, but which would then become on the title of the property, making it an extra cost for people to buy it. And I really feel that, and I know, I mean, the mayor uses example as senior citizen, he knows, and the taxes they pay and the income they have. And I don't want to be part of anything that really encumbers seniors and people on fixed incomes with the sale of their homes, or even being required to access the funding, even though it says it's, it's would not be imposed. In reality, if you have to have a certificate concerning energy things, this really seems to be, I think, a need to be reworked so that there's stronger support for people on fixed income and seniors.
Thank you for that. Councillor Earl?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I, for the most part, agree with Councillor Parslow's take. Having said that, I do think it's a moot point with respect to this particular communique, and the last one we dealt with on the agenda as well. I don't understand why this is being sent out by individual municipalities to other individual municipalities instead of being directed through UBCM, or I guess NCLGA, or the analogous organization for, so that's my take, is I'm not sure. I know some municipalities seem to be getting into the habit of sending out these kind of letters, but I do think it's a lot of labor. We are members of UBCM, and I think this would probably be a more appropriate avenue for them to pursue than to do it individually.
Thank you for that. I agree. I think marketplace is what drives innovation and drives demand for products and services. And marketplace today is driving the demand for this, and the offsetting focus of clean energy is a great mantra, and certainly I all the time in the world for that initiative where people are looking to reduce it, but it's always somebody else needs to be taking the lead on it. They need to start to do this. We need to create these. This will create great. Would create well-paying green jobs. Well, if that's the case, why isn't that happening today? And so, if it needs to, great green-paying jobs need to be created by subsidy from the provincial or federal government, then they're not great green-paying jobs. And so, to me, marketplace is what will drive demand. And how do you transition an economy off of what we have today into that new is the marketplace. And to me, I heard a really interesting comment at a conference about 2 years ago, and the very first hydrocarbons used by man for heat, energy, light, transportation, over 110, 120 years ago, the very first that were used by man are still in use today. Now, does that mean we're using them the same today? We've really transitioned in terms of how our economy, how our communities, how our households utilize energy. And that's going to continue to do, and that will drive the transition off of the demand of this and create these great green-paying jobs. But the consumers are driving the bus today. And I don't think we should be part of mandating a change that forces that in. Further discussion? Ready for the question? All in favor? We're rejecting the proposal. Opposed? All those? Carried. Thank you. Item 6.4, we have a letter from the Canadian Union of Postal Workers regarding a request for support of delivery community power. Councillor Earl, were you still on? I didn't shut you off.
I'm good.
Okay. Councillor Parslow?
I move that we receive this for information.
Thank you. Second? Councillor Earl? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 7.1, we have report number. So we're going to do this following our delegation at 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Brenda?
Yeah, through your worship, that was the intention.
Okay, good.
But we can try the delegation
Okay,
again.
great. If that's available, let's for sure do that. So, Edward, we have him available? So, Edward, we can hear you, I believe. I don't know that we can see you, but if you can hear us, welcome. And we appreciate you being here this morning, and we apologize for technology.
Can we hear him?
I'm sure going to be happy when we look behind at COVID. Okay, we will move on. We're not ready, and so I'll move to item 8, bylaws, report number 21035 from our corporate officer regarding our council procedure amendment bylaw, and this is some of the work that council has done recently. Brenda, go ahead. Oh, sorry, your mic was on, so no, by mistake. So, motion from council, please. Thank you, Councillor Parslow.
I keep waving my hand at you.
And I can't turn your light on with that.
I move that report number 21-035 from the corporate officer, read council procedure amendment bylaw number 4501 2021 be received. Further, council procedure amendment bylaw number 4501/2021 be provided first three readings.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kempf. Discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Parslow.
Yeah, when I read this, I got a little confused because, you know, you've made recommendations throughout the report, whether you wanted us to deal with those individual recommendations or not. But then I assume where the language at the bottom that you wanted, that approval will cover off all those recommendations unless we had some problems with them, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Further discussion? Honestly, I really appreciate the opportunity that we had to spend a couple hours talking about our council procedure bylaw. I really do believe what we do is provide that governance, and this procedure bylaw really provides us a really good overview of kind of that role that we have as a group, as a body representing the community, and I really appreciate the work that council have done on this as well as our staff, and thank them for that, because I believe it'll help us do a better job as a body and as individual members of council. Councillor Parslow?
Just further to that, I was just wondering if council would find it beneficial to have, I used to have a document that was laminated, and it would have all these different procedural things, and it was on the desk, right, for every member of my school board, right? I wonder if we could have such a, it was both two-sided,
Sure.
but, you know, when do I make a motion to defer? When do I motion how do I make an amendment to amend? There's just when it's appropriate. It might be useful for us all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I see our corporate officer nodding in agreement, and I'm certain we can put something together that would begin to give that little bit of a helpful aid for council while we're here, and that's a great suggestion. Thank you. So, any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. 8.2, we have report number 21039 from the corporate officer regarding the appointment of officers and delegation of authority bylaw. Councillor Earl?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendation that report number 21-039 from the corporate officer regarding appointment of officers and delegation of authority bylaw be received. Further, that appointment of officers and delegation of authority bylaw number 4479/2021 be provided first three readings. Further, that the Code of Conduct for Employees policy be amended by replacing the reference to Director of Personnel with Chief Administrative Officer.
Thank you for that. Second? Councillor Kemp, discussion? Comments? Councillor Parslow?
Yes, well, so in support of much of this, I still have a few questions around multi-year contracts. I remember I had some concerns around protecting future councils around contracts that were multi-year and had all sorts of financial implications without any seeming time limits to it, perhaps. So I just wonder how that's embraced in this policy.
Brenda?
Yeah, through your worship, the multi-year contracts in regards to the financial aspect, as long as they fit within the purchasing policy, let's say there's a contract that's worth $90,000 a year, and it's a 5-year contract. So then that total amount, with that total amount, it would require council approval to approve that. I'm not sure if that starts to answer your question or not, or if you want to further clarify.
Go ahead.
Go through that again with me. Increase the amount to $500,000, let's say, a year.
Okay, and your concern is,
So if there's a 10-year contract worth $500,000 a year, the council would be the one approving that contract, and you would have tied to that some independent legal opinion about that, or what? How would you go about it? Because, you know, I'm concerned not just about finances. I mean, I have absolute faith in administration, for sure. However, there are a few things, right, that come back to bite us that I think council, you know, they should have had a more thorough review. And I'm just concerned I don't want that to happen again, right? So when do you engage legal counsel? And is that covered off? I mean, because sometimes legal counsel is needed.
yep, through your worship, it just depends on the amount of risk, and that would be run through the CAO to see if we needed legal advice or not. That also is going to be addressed within the long-term contract policy that is next on the list for the staff to present to council.
Last comment?
Yep, go ahead.
On the news today, there was an interesting article about force majeure clauses and COVID. Very interesting. And that's what I'm getting at, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Blair?
Thank you, and through you, your worship. So just to make sure, when we look at this bylaw, if council approves a budget based on the amount of dollars in there, then the work that we're talking about here is laid out. So, and I'll go to the example you gave. If there was a contract that the city was looking at, council wanted to enter into, because we take the direction from council, we go out, we negotiate that contract. Most of our contracts have legal advice attached to them, is what I can say from my experience in the last 12 and a half months I've been here. There are ones that certainly we've come across, I would say, that maybe were presented that didn't have that advice. But what will happen is a contract, and I'll use $100,000, $200,000 a year, would come back to council if it's a multi-year contract, because it isn't the amount. You cannot, under this policy that we're looking at right now, for instance, try and defeat the threshold before it has to come back to council by saying, let's split it into 3 or 4 years. That way it's under the yearly threshold. It's the cumulative cost of that contract that will come back. So mayor and council will have that option to deal with those. And as Brenda said earlier, we're working on the policy for the long-term contracts to be brought back before council. The key will be, as that policy comes forward, many of these documents, and I can think of a couple, are 100+ pages long. It will be incumbent on council to read and understand that and ask the questions. Administration will do their best. We will bring you a recommendation based on the input that we've had, and certainly legal input is part of that, though. So,
Thank you for that. Further discussion? Councillor Earl?
Thank you, Your Worship. And just Blair partly answered my question, but I did want to follow up a little bit more on Section E, the management agreements, specifically the part where manager of the relevant department has the authority to approve the renewal on the same terms and condition as the initial agreement. I'm fine with that for the most part. I just want to make sure that we as a council are going to get a heads up before that agreement is approved in the event we're not, we'd like, you know, in the event we'd like to give input into changes with the agreement. I just want to make sure we're not going to find out, oh, we renewed 4 months ago and it turns out there were some deficiencies in the agreement that we would have liked to see addressed.
Brenda?
Through your worship, the initial agreement would include the renewal clause, so council would approve that at the time. Before the agreement would be renewed through staff would review the contract with the management group. If there was any concerns, they would bring it to council. But if there was no concerns and everything was flowing smoothly, that is why the renewal clause is there for staff to just carry forward. And if that's not something that council would like to consider, then they would just remove that from this bylaw.
I mean, my only concern is when we get into these agreements the first time around, everyone gets into it with the best of intentions, but there are things that arise you don't anticipate, which subsequently you might like to have in writing in order to, for the sake of covering our own skin. And that's something I'm thinking about is if, whether it's, I don't want to use any hypothetical or pick on any particular organism, but there are a couple where you see, it's being used in a way that it wasn't initially intended to use, it be used for, or it's being subletted out, or people are renting it out to private businesses, and now it's subsidized space. Things like that where maybe in the initial agreement it's not. And I think most of it will be covered off in the new template agreements that Ross is rolling out. So I don't have concerns about that. I just want to make sure, once the initial agreement's up, if there are some deficiencies, we have a chance to take a kick at the can. But as you said, if it's something that's going to be workshopped by managers, I trust you guys will have the insight to make those recommendations to us or bring it back to us for further discussion.
Go ahead, Brenda.
Yeah, through your worship, it's very important that council's comfortable with the delegation that they're providing to staff through this bylaw. So I did explain all the various delegations that are included within the bylaw, and I'm hoping that council is comfortable because it will just provide staff with the authority to carry on with day-to-day business a little easier without having to come to council and work within the timelines of the council meeting.
And also through the Committee of the Whole, where we get the monthly report from the department manager, if there are those concerns that council identify with respect to any of the facilities or services, that you would give that feedback back into management through those Committee of the Whole reports. And then that then would be part of the guiding information that administration would take as they move forward with the development of new contracts or new leases, I would assume. Councillor Parslow?
Yeah, I guess, I appreciate what Councillor Earl just said. That has been a reality. That has occurred. And you can't guard yourself against everything.
No.
And, of course, COVID has tested the waters quite a lot, in interpretation of contracts. The news article I referred to was on CBC. It was interesting. But how does staff guard against groupthink? That's sometimes a staff can work together well for a long period of time, and there's a culture developed. But how do you inject a new lens? We've got this framework for our contracts, and we think it's fine. But this little clause, that could be interpreted this way or that way. It's a difficult thing to guard against. I don't know how you guard against sort of just getting used to the way things are and getting that. And again, stewardship of the taxpayer dollars for engaging lawyers for everything, is something to be avoided. But again, COVID's injected a lot of things that have causing people to look at contracts a little closer. I'm not saying they haven't been analyzed well, but there have been some faux pas that I guess is making me a little paranoid. I'm going to vote in favor of this, but I'm just saying.
Thank you for that. Further discussion? You ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you for that. Thank you, staff. Mayor's business under item 9. And so the first item is childcare. And so, sorry? Oh, I wanted to go right on by that one. I want to, 8.3, we have report number 21038 from the building inspector regarding our cemetery bylaw number 4499/2021. Councillor Parslow?
Well, being closer than the rest of you to using this facility, I'd like to move the report 21-038 from the building inspector, cemetery bylaw number 4499/2021, and fees and charges amendment bylaw number 4500/2021 be received. Further, that cemetery bylaw number 4499/2021 and fees and charges amendment bylaw 4500/2021 be given first 3 readings.
Thank you. Second, Councillor Kemp. Discussion, Councillor Parslow first.
This is, I view this as a housekeeping business, keeping fees aligned with the actual, well, some of this is keeping in line with actual costs, right? And so I just view it as a housekeeping, nothing too much.
Thank you. Councillor Earl.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to mention that I think we last dealt with this quite some time ago when I was fairly new on council. So, and I know Councillor Dober has subsequently joined us since then. And I just wanted to mention the history here, as this was part of some work undertaken, I think, in this council's first year, as part of bringing many of the fees for service into alignment with current costs and minimizing the public subsidy. So that's what this is about. And I don't know if staff wants to add anything for context, but it is essentially housekeeping, but it's been a couple of years in the making.
Thank you for that. Kevin?
Yeah, through your worship, Councillor Earl certainly hit the high points there. I just wanted to touch on that. Yes, it was direction from council early in the term through budget process. So we've looked at updating all the fees, and you'll see some significant increases. Specifically, what we've done is we've now moved some of the interments from separated summer and winter, just because winter interments have such a significantly higher cost. So it's really about trying to seek cost recovery on those items. And so worked with Public Works and put all those numbers together to try and get what we feel is a reasonable recovery rate on those. And then the bylaw itself is it is a bit more than housekeeping. We really revamped it. Not that there was significant changes, but it was really about modernizing, cleaning it up, and providing a little bit more information in there for anybody that was looking at it. We've also provided some options that were not there before, such as scatter gardens that we'll be looking at in our new area in City Cemetery. And the thought there was providing multi-levels of price options for individuals moving forward. So, yeah, any questions, I'll
Thank you,
try and
Kevin.
answer them.
Councillor Parslow?
You state that you receive much in the way of legal opinions. What was the need for legal opinions in this particular venture? Was it like the use of the columbarium, or what was the?
So through your worship, cemeteries are highly regulated for good reason. So when we made any changes, we just needed to make sure that we weren't inadvertently contravening any of the acts. So that was really what it was, just strictly those kind of finer points to ensure that we hadn't stepped out of line.
Yeah, after asking the question, I mean, there's a lot of sensitivities and of course bereavement and so on going on, so it's best to avoid any unforeseen mishaps. I understand that.
Thank you. And there is one aspect, and I did mention it to Blair briefly on Thursday or Friday. We have this St. Francis Emile cemetery out on the banks of the Poos River, as you're on the Spirit River Road, and it's I don't know how big, a 5 or 10 acre plot in there of a extremely old cemetery that the city took on quite a while ago. And so, just for council's information, because it was a surprise to me when I found out we had that cemetery out there, and I just mentioned to Blair that the regional district at our last meeting just did some changes to our bylaw to be able to, out there, to be able to look after cemetery services that might be provided to and for and on behalf of residents outside the city. Blair, do you want to make any comment on that?
With that, I believe it was just last Thursday or the Thursday before the Peace River Regional District dealt with this, so we will engage them in a discussion. It'll be based on a resident, non-resident type issue, and if there is intent that funding will come from the regional district towards cemeteries for the city of Dawson Creek, then we would have to possibly look at an amendment on the resident versus non-resident costs. Which is certainly doable, but we'll engage in that discussion with the regional district first.
Thank you. Thank you. Further discussion? Councillor Parslow?
The cemetery you were referencing, Frank Briault and the Historical Society were at the forefront in cleaning that up and I think documenting who's buried there. And yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned that because it's historic interest as well.
For sure. Yeah, when Frank took me out a number of years ago, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago when I first was elected, it was just really interesting to see, and part of that, I think it was part of that old route from Poos to Rolla, Poos-Coopy to Rolla, and there was a crossing there, and that was the road connecting the two communities at that time, and it is a very, very old cemetery, and they've been doing a bunch of work there to try to identify and preserve it. Blair?
Just a quick update. We have had a call from people who have, again, taken it on to go out and clean it up, have expressed an interest. So I know Frank was involved originally. There are others now involved in going out to do some work on the site. So certainly always encouraging. It speaks to the people that we have in our region that are doing that. But we will engage the RD in this discussion as well. It's, many miles out of the city of Dawson Creek, and it's one that I think we can work together on.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you. Further discussion? Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Item 9 is mayor's business, and first item for me is childcare, and I've been honestly working on this discussion and this topic of childcare now for 5 or 6 months, and just trying to really learn about what some of the services are that are being provided in our community by childcare and for childcare, and what are some of the needs. And it's so diverse and it's so really complex in terms of how you deliver childcare, and there's childcare services that are being provided by people who are homemakers and run a child care out of their home. And then you've got the licensed facilities that, like Campus Care, Miss Patty's, and the Kiwanis Performing Arts Center, Calvin Crook Center operate a facility. And then you've got infant and toddler, and you've got potentially overnight care that's even more complex, and you've got before and after school care. And the demands for child care are really diverse. And so we've got a working group now together with a number of the childcare providers, Northern Lights College, Northern Health, and really the focus for me has been around how do we build a model that hopefully can help support that need for those emergency 724 workers at the hospital, at the RCMP, other segments in industry, and with the province as well. And so we really got some really great information starting to be put together, but I should not be losing sleep over stuff, and I have been losing sleep over this, because as Councillor Parslow, I'm close to that cemetery rule as well, and I shouldn't be worrying about stuff, but I am worrying about this one. And the worry has been, I think we need to put some structure in place, and I'm going to bring a report back to Council. There's funding opportunities for NDIT and the province and different things, and I think we now need to put some proper structure in place to start to lead this on behalf of the community and the region, to be able to start to ensure we get a proper business model put together for and on behalf of the community and region, and build that opportunity then for funding for different sources that exist in the Early Spaces Fund that the provincial government have in place, And there are about 3 or 4 different really major funding opportunities available for the creation of childcare spaces. So I just wanted to give you an update. I'll give council a written report for our next council meeting, and begin to put that information together and work with administration to be able to do that and come with a recommendation on how I think what we need to do in order to move it forward in a really meaningful and significant way. And I'd be happy to hand it off. No, I'm teasing. We have our regular every 2 weeks, Kathleen from the Chamber and myself meet with the folks from BC Housing on the project. And this really come about as a result of what we felt was a lack of engagement by our community on our local business folks involved in the project. And construction is nearing completion in terms of, I believe they're looking to mid-April, and I've talked to Arden at the Southeast Community Resources, who will be taking over management of it. Councillor Earl will be on that committee advisory committee representing us. And this work that we've been going every 2 weeks is just to be able to ensure we engage and support the construction of the project and identify and locate any local businesses for the project. This phase of construction will end, and then in the spring they'll finish off landscaping, sidewalks, paving, and all of that stuff. And we'll make sure we've link them up with any of our local businesses for that as well. So it's been really good to engage with them, and I know they've been very supportive, and it's been very worthwhile. I met with the new district manager for Northeast BC and Northwestern Alberta and Northern Alberta from TELUS, and he's a new area director. And I know there's a ton of stuff going on at the regional district level in terms of rural connectivity, and you hear that a lot for connectivity to rural and remote Canada. And so I met with Brian Bettis as the district manager, and he's been very engaging and talking about kind of some of the initiatives that they're working on for the region, and it was good to have the introduction with him. I had a call with Enbridge last week, and along with Lori and from Mayor Fort St. John and Mayor Fraser from Taylor, and we met with Enbridge in regards to some discussions about future development, and one thing that they are doing and moving ahead with that are in the initial stages of is a new facility in their location in West Pine, I think, in Chetwynd, and they're going to build a straddle plant in there. Their proposal is to build a plant in there that's going to be a pretty major project for probably 18 months or 2 years, and so that's really good to see for the region. Blair and I had a meeting with TC Energy last week, I believe, and it was with Heather and so we talked about their community investment, and so we talked about different initiatives that we've been involved in or they've been involved in for the community in the past in regards to hockey and the kindness meters and different stuff like that. And they're just looking at now the new allocation of funding, and so we had a really good conversation with them about that, and we'll continue to work away at identifying some of those opportunities. I've been a part of the Dawson Creek Hospital Redevelopment Capital Project and the Dawson Creek and District Hospital Redevelopment Project, and we had a committee meeting on Thursday. The planning is underway. They finished the request for qualification. So the first step is you got to find if you've got 2, 3, or 4 qualified contractors that have the capacity to take on a project of that size. That's now completed. I believe they have identified the required number that they need to move forward, and now they'll go forward with the project design, pricing, and build a component of it, and that work is underway. They've started to get their project team in place, so they've got a project manager now at the Dawson Creek Hospital, along with 3 or 4 staff, and they've got communications and IT, and so they're starting to build that project team now, and so it looks very positive to me in terms of the project moving forward in a very positive way, and it's such a huge component to our community, and we see that project hopefully begin by later this year or early in 2022 with a 3-year, probably 4-year anticipated build at and on the college property. So, any questions for Council? Councillor Parslow?
I was reading in the Pipeline News about a project that's happening fairly close to, let's say, between Mackenzie and Prince George. And I don't know if it was a typo. I'd heard of LNG, but the title was NLG. Now, it's a partnership with various players, but it does include a First Nations group. And I think it's a major thing to do with, I believe, derivatives from that. And so I sort of, it spawned a question in my mind, and then, I'll get to my question in a minute, then I heard from the mayor of Fort Nelson about $100 million geothermal project involving the Fort Nelson First Nations band and a variety of other people. So my question is, or my question is really a statement, you know, I mean, you have a good relationship with Soto, Doi, with the First Nations groups. It'd be kind of nice for us to have a big geothermal or let's say, a derivative of the rich field we have here as a local industry. And I wondered if there's any inquiries to be made in that regard with the parties, because we have geothermal potential here. So we have the one of the richest fields in North America. How come it went to close to Prince George for one and Fort Nelson for the other?
So there's two projects being considered right now in the Prince George, and it's part of the Enbridge line that goes south to feed
That's right, Enbridge was
Fortis.
applied, yes.
And so the two projects that are being considered is West Coast Olefins, and that's a major, what they're talking about is a major ethane stripping plant there. They're going to strip the liquids out of that Enbridge gas that's going south to Vancouver and produce a facility in Prince George is the plan. And now McLeod Lake First Nation and Clickley Tenay and Prince George have signed a partnership to build a similar a natural gas liquids facility, the NGL. And they're proposing to put a partnership together to build a facility there, and the plan is to use the liquids that are still contained in that line that Enbridge shipped south to Vancouver and Vancouver Island. The Clark Lake geothermal project that the Fort Nelson First Nations have just announced, they just got the $40 million funding announced last week from the federal government, and it's as a result of that geology of the Clark Lake, old Clark Lake field, gas field, that was hugely prolific in terms of the heat of the liquids and the gas that was being produced out of there. And so that's where the concept came to produce the Clark Lake project there with the Fort Nelson First Nations under the First Nations Major Coalitions group that are leading that with and on behalf of, and Fort Nelson First Nations are leading that. Yeah. And so that's kind of those three projects, but it's the demand for the liquids that are coming out of the natural gas sector in Northeast BC and the Montney in particular, where it bumps into is it's still being shipped to primarily, the liquids are still being sent to Fort Saskatchewan primarily for the petrochemical industry there. And why there hasn't been a development of the petrochemical industry here, my understanding from the BC Oil and Gas Commission, is because it starts to bang into the provincial government's targets on carbon intensity, greenhouse gas emissions. And so the more they develop those facilities, the more it creates the GHGs, and that goes against the provincial targets. And so they're more focused on developing the LNG industry and taking the natural gas and letting the liquids go to Alberta. And because if they build the facilities here to strip those liquids out, then it creates more greenhouse gas intensity, and then that goes against their targets that they've got set for themselves provincially.
Mayor gave an excellent answer, shall we give him a Good, thank you.
I did my best.
Yeah, you did a good job.
Councillor Dober.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks for the update on everything. I just had a question just regarding the construction of the hospital and stuff, and obviously it's a unique build, but do they have a mandate to use local contractors and subcontractors? And I know there's some very well-qualified people in our community and surrounding area.
Yeah, so my understanding is when they build a project of potentially, I honestly, 350, 400, 450 million, I don't know what the total project will be. So it's very difficult for any one company in a community like this to get the bonding required to be able to take on a project of that size. And so what they usually do, and I know they did it in Fort St. John, is the prime contractor who takes it on then will reach out into the local community for the electrical, mechanical, construction support to build it. And I emphasize to the team on Thursday or Friday about this is, look, 40% of the project is paid under the capital that's gathered from the residents and business community of northeastern British Columbia. We pay the residents under through the requisition to the Peace River Regional District under the Regional Hospital District. We pay 40% of any capital project for and equipment for Northern Health to the province. And so what I emphasize to them is, listen, our residents, our businesses are funding 40% of this project. You need to ensure that you support our business community with that. And the other thing, my expectation is you're not putting a camp out at Eris or in between here and Poos to house the workers for that project. It has to be one that supports our community in a way that 40% of the project is being paid by our residents and business community. So we did emphasize that point exactly to them. And then the other thing we said was once the prime contractor is awarded, that we'll start to do that at local engagement. We'll do the public engagement sessions for our local businesses to introduce them to that prime contractor, to ensure we leverage every opportunity to get the support for our local businesses.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Earl, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be quick. So thank you for the update on the hospital. I echo your sentiments about local content. I think the challenge is always prime contractors and getting that message to kind of percolate down through the secondary and tertiary people they bring on so that they're not defaulting onto kind of the networks, the established networks they have that they're familiar with. In a pinch, once the rubber hits the road, I know that's always a challenge. And not necessarily for this meeting, but for a future meeting as it's spring is on its way, maybe. Could we get an update on the 8th Street Bridge and what we can expect around timelines for that, either from yourself or staff, or invite somebody from the Minister of Transportation to give us a brief update, just so we can, as councillors and as a city, start communicating to our constituents what they can expect, as I know we're going to go to a single lane at some point this year.
For sure.
And lastly, I was going to make a cheeky comment when you were mentioning the GHGs and how that processing is being directed to Alberta. If anybody had advised climate change about the border, but that's fine. I won't do that.
Thank you. Blair?
Your Worship, the question with regard to the 8th Street Bridge, very timely. Kevin and I were on a call last week with Ministry of Transportation, and we will have that set up to have somebody come to council to give an update based on the time frame, what's going to take place this year, and so on. So,
Good. Thanks, Blair. So that's it for me, and now we'll move on to item 10, our Chief Administrative Officer's operational update. Blair?
Your Worship, well, thank you. Not a lot, you've covered a lot of ground today. I did want to update council. I am looking into the fire training center as per a previous discussion of council. I will have a report back to you. I would anticipate at our next meeting, but it does have quite the history. It goes back to about 2008. So far, the information I have been able to garner and get into, but I will bring a report for your consideration based on the future of that facility, how it's best used, how we can get the best out of it for not just our fire department, but the fire departments in the region as well, to use this as a training center. There's also, last meeting, we talked about Freedom Mobile and the lease agreement they were looking to enter into at our facility, which is the motocross track that we lease. They will be, it looks as though at the next meeting presenting, there is no time sensitivity to this, so they will come forward, give a presentation, and we will follow up based on the lease that is being proposed for that location as well. there's any questions of that, I want council to know. I'm sure the question was, where was it? Where was this issue at? And that is it for today.
Good. Thank you, Blair.
Questions, Your Worship?
Good, thank you. Diary?
Nothing new to report, Your
Okay.
Worship.
Consent calendar, we got 3 or 4 items. Motion for consent, Councillor Dober?
Sorry, I was going back. I did have a question for
okay,
Blair. Is
sure,
that
go
okay?
ahead.
Sorry, I was a little late on pushing the button. And
Waving your hand?
yeah, I just had a question. You sent the email out about the grants and stuff, and then there was also that grant email that went out last week, and I just wanted a little clarification. I get some things like pop up like that, but when that grant one was sent out, I asked just for some information on it, and like I couldn't get it. So I'm just wondering like what the process was, and then just if you could clarify what your email was about the grants that you sent out.
Blair?
Now, the email I sent out, there seems to have been a lot of discussion from Mayor and Council over the last while, wondering if we're getting all the grants that are out there, are we pursuing them? I've said many times, I think we need a project first and then you pursue the grant. To pursue a grant and then try and find a project to make it fit is not the way business should be done, I don't believe.
Yeah.
But there was questions, how well have we done over the years? What have we done? So that list was to try and put a perspective over the last, I'm going to say 10 years. We've received a little over $20 million in grants on average, so over $2 million a year. Some major, some minor, but it was really for information is what I wanted to put out before council.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted some clarification because there was the request and then that came right after, so I wasn't sure if they were.
Okay. And then there are, and you mentioned it, there are on occasion grants that come out. And the most recent one that we dealt with was one for the airport. And we had 5 days to put that together. So, you know, a huge thank you to Rowan, who is our airport manager, who was able to do that, working with Becky here at the city. And we were able to get that and we're successful.
Yeah. No, I think it was great. I was just, thank you.
Thanks, Darcy. Consent calendar, we have 4 items. Anybody want to lift any one of those items from the consent? Motion to approve the consent calendar. Councillor Earl, Councillor Kemp, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Strategic priorities chart, and this is the updated 2021 strategic priorities for council. So, motion to approve the strategic priorities. Councillor Dober, second Councillor Kemp. Any discussion? The addition this year is the new strategic priorities is to look at our airport and look at that structure that exists for it and how do we make it a stronger, more regional model. Any discussion, comments for council? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Media. So we'll take before we start committee of the whole, we'll take a 5-minute or 6-minute break and we'll move back into committee of the whole. Thank you. Good morning, Edward. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Oh, awesome.
I'm just going to stop the door because I can hear it twice.
Okay. So with that, I want to introduce Ross to give an introduction of Edward once again.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council, and I would like to reintroduce Edward Stanford, who is with Urban Systems. Urban Systems is going to help the city out with developing a redevelopment plan for the Rotary Lake site. Last year, council provided direction that we would not challenge the Rotary Lake order from Northern Health, and as such, we do need to come up with a plan B or a redevelopment plan for the site. In discussions with Edward and some of his team, we felt that it was important to have a conversation with council directly as we set up the goals and objectives for the public consultation and ensure that from this day moving forward, we understand clearly the direction from council. So I'm not sure if I missed anything, Edward, but I think we're on the way.
Thank you, Ross. Welcome, Edward. Thank you for your patience, and we're happy to have you join us.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, for allowing me the opportunity to join you as a delegation, being part of your busy council agenda today. I'd just like to say a big thank you to Julianne and Melissa for helping set up the Zoom call. One of the great things about being 5 minutes away in our Dawson Creek office was that I could just be here in the next door room. So as Ross introduced, I'm the partner with Urban Systems. I'm based in our Fort St. John office and have had the privilege of living up in the Peace with my family for 21 years as of next week. So very briefly, we set out a proposed framework as a sort of 4-part plan for engagement of stakeholders who have an interest in the future development of the Mile Zero Park, which of course includes Rotary Lake. And so task 1 and 2 would happen together, and I'll just run through those 4 tasks for everybody, and then maybe you can provide some input at the end. So task 1 is really to create some guiding principles. Many projects, this one will be no different. They have a planning and development process that can occur over a number of years. And often we see changes as we create a team around that project. There will be changes on that team. So that could be changes at the council table, it could be changes within administration, and certainly changes within stakeholder groups as well associated with project planning. So as I say, task 1 and task 2 will happen in parallel. The idea about having some guiding principles for this project is to keep the decision-making constant throughout the duration of the project, so that as we're creating concepts, we are always going back to those guiding principles. These will be revisited throughout. So in combination with number 1 is creation of this engagement team, and we are looking to propose to bring together service clubs, local organizations, and the community to help envisage what Mile Zero Park could look like. So those groups could be the South Peace Mile Zero Park Society, obviously, Dawson Creek Rotary, Dawson Creek residents, some youth representation. The city would have a seat on at that table, and our own team as far as graphic recording and development of those concepts. All these meetings are proposed to be virtual. And there would be a series of meetings that would create task 3, which is the development of 3 concepts. So based on everything that we're hearing, we want to capture all the ideas that this team presents to us as a series of storyboarding to match the guiding principles that we have. And then task 4 would be to take all those ideas that were captured under 3 concepts and create 1 concept. From that, in combination with the team, is to develop a Class D cost estimate so that one has a better understanding on how to move that project forward. It's important to understand that this process of engagement and concept development being undertaken, being proposed, it will very likely be that there will be a water play feature somewhere in the community, and possibly at the existing site where Rotary Lake exists within the Mile Zero Park. This is very much to be part of the discussion, and certainly part of establishing those principles and project criteria. Yes, Rotary Lake is within a floodplain, but it's reasonable to establish a water play feature there. It's possible also that as that project progresses, all those stakeholders that are part of the project team could play key roles at every stage of the development of this park. I'd just like to thank the GM of Community Services for, as you said, we've had several meetings leading up to this. The engagement hasn't started, but I would just like to open it up to Council through yourself and for any questions or discussion.
Thank you, Edward. Councillor Parslow.
Thank you. Hello, Edward.
Hello.
I've got a few things here. First of all, we were talking about the Mile Zero Park, but specifically, really, you're talking about the Rotary Lake part, aren't you?
Well, through the chair, actually, we're talking about looking at the whole site.
So you're looking at the
Not
RV
just-
site and the Pioneer Village?
But no, we would be looking at creating stronger connections back to the surrounding area. So that could be everything from, when we're talking about the principles behind the park, is what elements, the gateway into the community, the connection back to the rural area. You say Walter Wright Park, the RV, the cemetery, all those elements will come into the programming opportunities discussion for how the whole park is looked at, not just in isolation.
I see. So the BMX park, you know that's part of the property, right? Yeah,
That's
that
right.
will be included. I'm hoping that the guiding principles will align with the city's guiding principles. You know, we have a document that outlines the guiding principles for the city. I would suggest that there should be a strong alignment. Okay, that's all I have from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parslow. And Councillor Earl.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Edward, for that. I'm looking forward to this process. I do have a couple, I guess, thoughts to put out there while we're in the initial stages of this conversation. So I agree with your assessment that a water play feature seems to be something that is gaining some traction in our city. I do see some other people who are keen to just still insist that we get some sort of replication of Rotary Lake back, and for a number of reasons, that's not doable, I'm sorry to say. One thing I do worry about, I guess the term I'd use is mission creep, in that in trying to find something to occupy that space and that's going to serve the community, we try and be everything to everyone and cost balloon, and before we know it, we've got a large, unwieldy facility that costs more to operate than we intended, and that's something I very much want to avoid as we set out these guiding guidelines for developing this. I know our existing annual contribution to Rotary Lake was about $70,000 to maintain that in the water park. So I think as we move forward on this, trying not to increase the annual subsidy or add new cost centers to the city above and beyond what we've already committed to is something that's important to me. And similarly, as we engage with stakeholders to make sure we're not biting off more than we can chew, and the event center comes to mind or I guess the South Peace Community Multiplex comes to mind as something that was initially intended to be much less expensive than it was, and by the end of it, became something altogether different. And my hope is that we will have learned the lesson from that, and as we pursue this, do keep in mind that we're what the end goal is, and that we're not, once again, trying to be everything to everyone.
Thank you. Councillor Parslow?
Just as a heads up to you, Edward, every year the Rotary Club in Dawson Creek has a auction, and one of the members who works as part of the Force Engineering group here, they have done a lot of work already in this regard as to the aspirations for that park. They've been doing it for about 2 weeks, and I'm told that from the president of the Mile Zero Park Society, that they've had a great deal of interest. So I would want to make sure you knew that it happened and that you accessed that work. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dober?
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Edward. I'm just had a question around the Mile Zero Parks. Like, I know, do they have other visions for the Rotary Lake area besides like a water park? Because I know, there might be other areas in the community that might be more suited for if we're rebuilding something. But I just kind of wanted to know what their vision was of that area. Like, are they just seeing it as a water park, or do they have other ideas for it?
Well, through the chair, an interesting question, and I don't want to presume ahead of any engagement process where the water park could and should be, and I just wanted to make it clear that it could happen on this site. It could happen somewhere else in the community.
So do they have other, is there other envisions for that area if it wasn't a lake? Like, is there like...
This is where council
That will
given
be
that.
part of the process.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Councillor Parslow? Sorry, Councillor Dober, you're done? Councillor Parslow?
Well, I was just trying to say that to answer to, as the liaison to the Mile Zero Park Society, they have a broad set of aspirations for the location. The input that is being received by the Rotary clubs already shows a very broad interest for a whole bunch of things, but they all include some water thing there. Anyway.
Thank you. Thank you, Edward. And for me, two or three things in terms of comments. Obviously, the Rotary Lake, first of all, Rotary Lake has been that iconic feature, I think, of our city and community and region for 60 or 70 years. And for all of us who were born and raised, I can't tell you that how passionate we saw the residents and the community over the last 4 or 5 or 6 years after the closure of the park and the lake and the facility. And so I think that passion that the community has had for it, I think, demonstrates to me the desire that council have now reached a conclusion based on the closure order from Northern Health that we're not going to pursue that any further. And now we need to look at a redevelopment plan for that location and that property, and what does that envision in a whole in terms of the future of that property in the long term. And so to me, that's this direction now that we're going to take, is to have you guys take that initiative now and start to build that planning mechanism in place and say, what is the property going to be used for? What are some of the amenities we'd like to see included in from the residents, from the business community, from the service clubs, from the operator of the Mile Zero Park, from our staff? And then to be able to build upon that and say, okay, does it include some of these amenities that we would like to have there? And if it can't be accomplished there because of the flood, then do we look at another opportunity of developing something other in another facility in the community in the long term to be able to incorporate some of those things and amenities that we would like to see in a park? And from my view, it's more than just a summer park. It's a park of all seasons that provides amenities for winter and summer, and not just for specific pieces of it. The one thing I would like to add, Edward, and it talked about the item 2 on your team, and we really are the regional center for the South Piece in terms of those services that we provide, and are looked upon by our rural neighbors for the provision of some of those amenities and services. And certainly we saw that in our public meetings that we had over Rotary Lake. We had a strong representation from our rural people, and maybe it would be worthwhile for us to reach out to our electoral area directors, D and E, Dan Rose and Leonard Hebert, and say, look, we got this planning mechanism going on. You guys are a strong part of our community, and we'd like to have some representation from the rural folks into this planning piece to be able to get their input into it as well, because they are strong supporters of our community and the amenities that are provided here. And the other piece that I really think is so important, and we've talked about it, is the flood issues that we've faced there. And I just think for Kevin's team, who have done a lot of that flood mitigation work and planning work and et cetera, that we make sure that we have them as a piece of that as well to guide that group in terms of that historical planning work that's underway now and has been for us, to make sure that that helps guide the decisions or the information that the planning team have as it relates to that flood mitigation work and history. So anyway, that's for me, I really think it's important the guiding principles get put in place, and I love the idea of engaging community and then deciding what the future of that property looks like. So
Great, thank you.
further comments for Edward? Staff, good to go. Blair?
No, Your Worship, I think you summed it up. The key, I mean, it is an iconic facility or area down there. I think the Mile Zero Park Society has done an incredible job over the years of running it for us. I think this engagement, they are going to be a key player, as Rotary will be, as all the residents and we talk about. But I encourage people to engage when the opportunity is there. We are going to look at some form of redevelopment, whatever that may be. We'll find out through this kind of discussion we're about to have. And Edward, I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, Blair. Edward, anything further to conclude?
No, just wanted to thank you very much for your time and patience and getting me in as a delegation today.
Edward, thanks so much. We appreciate your patience, and it was good to see you today and good to hear from you, and we look forward to this work progressing. It's probably the most important decision the community's made, and so we don't want you to feel the weight of that. No, I'm teasing you. Thank you so much for taking it on, and we look forward to the development of this planning work.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, staff, for helping to get Edward part of this today. It was good to have that completed. So move to Committee of the Whole under item 15, and our Staff Sergeant here. Yes? So we'll get the Staff Sergeant in and have Damon join us. Good morning, Damon. Welcome.
Is this on already, or do I have to turn it on or something? Oh, perfect, thank you.
Power the mic. Power the gavel.
Do I have to move it? Yeah, no? Perfect. Well, thank you for allowing me to present to you today. So I'll be presenting the policing report for February of this year. So for February of 2021, we did not have any members in or out of the detachment for that month. We continue to operate surplus to establishment by one position, so we're overstaffing because of the vacancies that we have, the soft vacancies. That being said, the detachment's presently running 6 soft vacancies, so an improvement from last month when we had 7. Not mentioned on this report is we do have a couple members incoming as well here over the next few months. So we did we received a recruit about 2 weeks ago. I don't know if she's made her way over to meet you yet, but she will be soon. Expect another 2 members within 1 to 2 months that they'll be incoming as well. So our vacancies are slowly being addressed, and expect over the next 2 to 3 months, hopefully, that most of them will be filled. So. For crime trends between the period of January 1st and February 28th, we saw a total of 1,264 calls for service. If you have my report in front of you, I did make an error there. I apologize. It's not 3,103 calls from last year. It's actually 1,303, so I played around with 2 numbers there. So our calls for service this year is down from last year, during which we had 1,303 calls for service during the same time period, or a decrease of about 3%. Of those, we saw 80% within the city and 20% in the rural area. And so this is the first time I've actually seen those numbers. Generally, we see about 78% in the city, 22% in the rural, maybe sometimes 79, 21. So we're slowly inching a little bit more calls within the city and less in the rural side. We'll see if that continues throughout the year, but that's what we're seeing right now. Comparative to the same time for last year, this equates to an increase of calls for service within the city of 2% and a decrease of calls in the rural area of 19%. I changed in my reports now how I'm reporting to you on our crime trends. And the reason I did that is previously I was reporting to you this month's crime trends compared to the same month from the previous year. And what I found was it wasn't really reflective of our crime trends as we move throughout the year. Because sometimes we just have months that are often left field, perhaps a really busy month with drugs or impaired driving, and it kind of threw the stats out. So I've changed the reporting now for year to date, January 1st to February 28th, and each month it'll be more accurate crime trends as we make our way through the year. I hope you're okay with that. If you're not, let me know and I'll switch it back, because this is for you. But I wanted to give you a little bit more specific changes in crime trends of what we're seeing. So you're seeing what I see now. So, and what we're seeing so far is really what we've been seeing over the last year or two is most of our property crime is decreasing. So big decreases in theft of vehicle and break and enters, with some slight increases in persons crimes. We see quite a large increase in drug possession, drug trafficking files or investigations. And again, I attribute that to most of the proactive work that we've been doing over the last year. So we're doing more and more proactive work that's increasing the number of drug investigations that we're generating. As an example, just last night we did another warrant on a rural property and seized a bunch of drugs and guns. And I put that media release out if you saw it. Impaired driving is a little bit of a surprise there. We didn't really see any large increases in impaired driving last year. However, this year, year to date, we're seeing quite a big increase in impaired driving. Nothing really else that's surprising on there. A slight increase in mental health calls. So we'll see if that increases throughout the year or if it goes down. For our annual policing priorities, we're still in the process of building those and identifying what they are. If you recall, we had an online public input period for 2 weeks during which we collected information from the public through CJDC that helped us out. And from those, we identified the top 4 priorities as identified by members of the community in the Dawson Creek and the area. So the top 4 that they identified in no specific order was traffic, substance abuse, property crime, and community policing. So I took those priorities that I got from the public input, and I brought those towards before our interagency committee, which we held last week, for any input or feedback that our stakeholders and partners would have. And I didn't really receive anything that would change those priorities. But I did consider adding a 5th priority to address persons crimes that, as I've noted, they've been going up slowly year over year. So I think it's likely that we'll probably see 5 policing priorities, the 5th one being not on your list, but persons crimes. To address persons crimes, we already have a couple of initiatives in place, such as the ICAT program, the Interagency Case Assessment Team, which is it's a committee that deals with high-risk domestic violence calls. So that's new to Dawson Creek. We're taking part in that. We have members getting trained, and we're going to be part of the committee that's addressing those high-risk domestic violence calls. And the purpose of it is to collaboratively work with partners and create a risk management plan to address the matter of domestic violence. Another thing that we're doing for persons crimes, just so you know, which will probably be built into our policing priorities, is we just recently submitted a funding request in partnership with Spectra for the Family Violence Initiative funding, which is a grant, and we requested $17,500 for sex assault proactive education in the community, as well as to establish protocols between partners for a seamless investigation for sex assault. So we are doing some things already for persons crimes, and those will be built into our priorities as we build them up. That's all I have for you today, pending any questions from you.
Thank you, Damon. Any questions from Council? Go ahead, Councillor Earl.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Staff Sergeant, for your report. So a couple quick questions I've got. First, with respect to the incoming members to fill vacancies, is that based on the anticipation we're going to have some people transferring out, or is that based on the assumption that some of those soft vacancies are going to be long-term and will require a backfill?
Both. So yeah, we do have members transferring out, at least 3 or 4 probably over the next 6 months.
Okay.
So we're risking out bringing those members in early to fill some of our temporary soft vacancies while waiting for those other members to move out. And basically what I'm doing is avoiding having any hard vacancies. So.
Okay, thank you. And follow-up piece on the, something that I came across in my discussions. Sometimes I chat with other municipal people from throughout the province, and I know Williams Lake City Council has recently, they're making a very strong statement about chronic offender resources and monitoring. Specifically, they feel that ankle monitoring is underutilized in sentencing by the courts. And I know chronic offender monitoring has been one of your key priorities over the last couple of years. And I was hoping to get your read on, because I read the court dockets every week that come out in the paper, and you see people being given a suspended sentence or released on their own things of that nature where they're not, and I understand, 60 to 80 grand to incarcerate someone is not necessarily a good use of taxpayer resources if they're not a danger, but by the same token, when it comes to chronic offenders who've demonstrated they're incapable or unable or unwilling to abide by the terms of their release, I was just wondering if ankle monitors are something that is utilized in our community, or to what extent is that helping or frustrating your efforts?
Yes, we have seen ankle monitors being used, and I've actually seen them being used more and more over the last 1 or 2 years. But we have to keep in mind also that ankle monitors require LTE or data in order to work, because if they're not connected to some kind of a network, we're not going to be notified when they're leaving the property or leaving their home. So many locations, particularly those that are rural, lack cell phone service or LTE, so ankle monitoring wouldn't work. But I am seeing them being used more, like you said, and more so within the city of Dawson Creek where there's data.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parslow?
Well, I was pleased to hear about your grant application with Spitters. I read newspapers from different countries, and violence against women is a real problem. But I'm so pleased to see that proactive stuff.
I'm glad, sir.
So how many people, do you know how many people responded to this input that you partnered with CJDC about? The
105 respondents.
105, yeah. So the city will have a chance as well. I see that. So that's good.
Yes, sir. I think I've booked my time with the city with yourselves on April 12th, if I'm correct. So.
Okay. So this is a question that spawned from another discussion I had, not here. Are there any statistics around the dropout, if I can use that term, of the members, they get trained and then they leave the force within the first 5 years, let's say? I know the number of teachers who do that, is an incredibly high percentage. So I'm just curious about the retention, I guess, into the force out of Regina, and I wouldn't mind hearing about that.
That's a great question. Are you looking specifically for Dawson Creek?
No, just in general.
Or BC? Okay.
Just in general. Yeah.
I can happily provide that to you for sure. Not right now, but I'll collect the information and report it for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kempf?
Awesome. Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a question. On your report, Damon, you have the COVID contravention-related calls, and you have 39. I'm not sure if you're able to answer this, but do you know how many individuals have received tickets for non-mask compliance, or any businesses within Dawson Creek?
No businesses directly have received fines. The majority of our COVID-related calls have been masks. And like anything else, we're generally education first and enforcement if necessary. So the fines that are being issued are the persons that are outright refusing generally to wear a mask. So offhand, right now, I don't know the numbers specifically. I would take a wild guess and say that we've probably issued about 30 face mask tickets or fines, as well as I believe 3 fines to protesters that were not in compliance with COVID rules right now. So.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Damon. Further comments, questions? Damon, thank you.
Very good.
Appreciate
Thank you for having me.
coming in this morning, and appreciate the report. Next, 15.2, we have a report from Spectra Venue Management regarding tourism Dawson Creek. So I'm Dustin. Morning, Dustin. Welcome. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship, Council Administration, for allowing us to do a quick update on tourism. As it's been reported in the news pretty much every week over the past year, COVID-19 has obviously had a significant impact on the tourism hospitality industry on a provincial scale, national scale, and international scale. You know, anytime that you have an industry that the whole focus is people moving around from community to community, province to province, and country to country, there's going to be an impact. As kind of recorded in the report in front of you, the visitor center stats did see a significant decrease in 2020. It was about a year ago today that, you know, the visitor season was kind of starting to ramp up and then kind of fell off the cliffside, was closed down for 2.5 months as we kind of created a plan to reopen as the different phases in the province allowed us to do so. As we kind of move into the 2021 visitor season, again, there's a lot of those unknowns. We're not expecting the border to open up anytime soon. So, you know, the planning process is around, you know, focusing on local and regional partnerships, making sure that we're providing correct information for those that are coming into the community and getting them around to the different tourism sectors in the region that are allowing visitation. You know, obviously the golf sector, both in the region and in the province, saw, you know, a big boost last year, as well as other outdoor activities, which, you know, Dawson Creek and northern BC definitely flourish in. Another kind of big focus in the coming months will be, you know, finding new revenue streams for the visitor center as we kind of manage through the different changes, and then as well really focusing on, again, that regional and community partnerships that we have with our other communities, Chetwynd, Tumbler Ridge, Fort Nelson, etc. Another key focus, as we've talked about in previous presentations, is obviously preparing for the event tourism sector to, you know, come back up eventually. Continued conversations with Hockey Canada regarding our U18 National Championship. Very pleased of Councillor Parslow's report earlier today about the NDIT funding, so that's great. Last year, obviously, we were supposed to host that event last November. We're again keyed up to have that event come to the community in October, November 2021. And a big focus last summer, as we were kind of planning and not knowing the uncertainty of the event, was, you know, working with other cities, major cities and national sport organizations, and even, you know, groups like the Vancouver Canucks, on how to put together that COVID, you know, safety plan so they could get passed through Northern Health and other provincial health authorities. That's really all I have for you today. If Council has any questions regarding tourism in general, plans for the summer, etc., I'd be happy to respond.
Thank you, Dustin. Councillor Earl.
Hello. Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Dustin. Good to see you. So with respect to, and I understand you can't, forecast what's going to happen along the border, but in keeping up with what's going on in the U.S., it looks like they're on pace to have the vast majority of Americans vaccinated by about July of this year. So while I'm not sure what that bodes for us, I would, I am hopeful that we'll have somewhat of a tourism season if it's safe to do so. Are we ready to go? Or, I mean, how much does it take to ramp up if we find that we are busier than anticipated?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So, in hearing all the news and updates, and of course everything is based on vaccinations on both sides of the border, but we're preparing for the case of having a visitor season that is of people traveling around the region, provincial, people from the Lower Mainland or, the Cariboo-Chilcotin Coast region, coming up to the north, and even, visitors from Saskatchewan, Alberta, visiting. So that's what we're kind of planning for in the short term, knowing what we know today. There are still a number of large tour groups, both bus tours and caravan tours, that were booked to do their Alaska Highway trip in 2020 and then got postponed to 2021. And then those that were booked for 2021, and they're still booked at this point, right? As we kind of learn more over the coming weeks, or probably in the next, month and a half, those larger groups will either have to postpone again into 2022 or cancel, just like other tourism sectors have seen cancellations, whether that's cruise industry or airlines, etc. So we'll be able to ramp up for what we are able to ramp up for the summer.
Okay, and just one more quick one. With respect to engaging with our local restaurateurs and hoteliers, what does the structure, what have you, how often are they being engaged in kind of your routine comings and goings? Are we in pretty reasonably consistent contact with them? Are they being reached out to on a regular basis?
Yeah, again, thanks for the question. It is on a regular basis. There are a number of kind of key stakeholders that we touch base with throughout the course of the year to kind of get a feel of what the industry is doing. For instance, the accommodation sector has seen a significant impact. We know that some properties had closed earlier last spring. Right now, as of last week, some of them are hitting that 35 to 45% occupancy. Again, quite low for what we would normally see right now, but they're hoping everything's based on what industry is doing in the region. A lot of our small businesses, again, some of them have done quite well and have pivoted. And I salute all of them, because running a business during a COVID time would be a very challenging undertaking. But some of them have pivoted well, and some of them are still struggling, right? When you can only have so many people through an establishment at a given time, that's a challenge. So I think some of our businesses are, again, doing well, but it's that foot traffic that they normally see that they're not seeing right now.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dober?
For your presentation. I just had a couple things. Just obviously this last year with the pandemic and COVID and things being so different, and really we don't know what the new world's going to look like when we're done this. Like, is there, with the extra time you guys have had, I'm assuming, is there been what have been the focuses of the staff and what they're working on now, but also what direction are they going towards when we come out of this?
Yeah. Again, thanks for the question. So from the beginning of COVID, it was kind of there was a mitigation phase, right? prepare for what we're the uncertainty of everything and scale back. Then it's kind of the reopening of the community. So kind of the key focus last summer was trying different innovation things that we'd never done before, whether that's, a drive-through pizza party, really dialing in on that, shop local and buy local aspect. And then, kind of, as we kind of reimagine what tourism looks like in the future, it's stronger collaborations with regional partnerships, and then revenue generation, right? Finding those different things that we never were able to do before.
Thank you. And when you say stronger collaborations with the area, what have we done in that area?
Yeah, again, thanks for the question. One of the things that we've, there's always been for the last number of years, a collaboration with a number of northeastern BC communities, ranging from Mackenzie all the way up to the Northern Rockies District and all of the cluster communities right here in the South Peace and North Peace region. And we've all kind of put in a certain amount of resources every year to either focus on Alaska Highway marketing and projects, or other activities that can further promote the region. In the last year, I think some stronger alliances and campaigns with a place like Tumbler Ridge, where we have different tourism assets, but we can actively promote one another's communities in a stronger way than maybe we had done in the past. So I think that was a big win last summer.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Parslow.
I'm glad to see you had in your reports comments about art murals. I'd like to encourage you, in partnership with the Art Gallery, to apply for an NDIT grant and develop a plan with those murals are maintained. I think you're eligible for a grant for that, so you might want to research that.
Perfect. And yes, the art gallery team and ourselves got into some quite lengthy discussions last fall as new COVID money was coming out that didn't exist before, and we've done work in the past year and a half with, looking at what the murals needed for downtown. So yeah, thank you very much for that.
Yeah,
that comment.
the ones we have all need restoration. Just a question around guests. When I read the sentence which reads, in a typical year, group travel can see a total of 1,700 to 2,000 guests visit and stay in Dawson Creek. I missed the RV thing, which led, though, this question: how many bus tours? I know there are some bus tours come to Dawson Creek, and how many on a normal year? Do you recall?
That come to Dawson Creek or stay in Dawson Creek?
They're on their way up the highway.
Yep.
They are. I've been part of hosting some of those, right, at the Mile Zero Park.
Yeah.
With Joyce Lee. And I just wonder how many because I presume those people, it was an evening presentation, so they would be staying in hotels. I'm just kind of interested, on average, how many bus tours pass through Dawson Creek and stay here overnight?
So if you jump to that second page of the report, for bus tours, there's usually about 7, depending on the year, anywhere from 15 to 20 bus tours coaches that
oh yes, I missed
do
that.
the Dawson Creek Alaska Highway trip. With that, not all 20 of those tours stay in Dawson Creek, right? But how we record, just like you said, those, stop on, welcome, roll out the red carpet, welcome to Mile Zero type programs, is how we kind of record how many people, as well as, touching base with a couple of our accommodators, because as they build these itineraries and people are booking, these tour groups are booking these hotels, they're doing this 2 to 3 years in advance, right? So there's a couple properties in town that always get that same business, because that's what's part of their itinerary. So on average, how many of them stay in Dawson Creek? 7 to 9.
Okay.
Compared to the 15 to 20. So we're probably getting about 50% of them that are staying overnight, and then the other ones are making a longer trip. So they might, one of their destination stops might be Edmonton, Grand Prairie, and then they're headed to Fort Nelson, right? So it really depends on the history of their itinerary bookings for those larger groups.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dustin. Blair?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question, Dustin. You mentioned the bus tours, and I think they've always been an integral and important part of our community's tourism. They were postponed last year. You mentioned this year they will either postpone or cancel. Any indication? I mean, I look, you can put 50 or 60 people on an airplane next to each other within feet. I'm just wondering, is there an indication that there will be no bus tours? Have they made that call already this year? Or are we still waiting maybe for, as you indicate, another month and a half before they make that call?
Yeah, I think you're right on that one. I think it's probably going to be within the next few weeks, right? Where these tours have either contacted us or we've contacted them to see where their planning is going right now. And only one of them to date has, and actually it was a caravan group that has decided that they're canceling for 2021, right? So on the caravan side of things, and these are the RV groups that travel as a group up. I know that one of the campgrounds down at Mile Zero has 6 tours that are booked for this year, but it's still, when does the border open, right? So that business could either, happen or else get postponed to 2022.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Dustin. Any further questions? Thanks, Dustin. Appreciate you coming in.
Excellent, thank you.
15.3, we have a report from our corporate officer. Good morning. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Today's report identifies our strategic priorities that the department staff have identified for 2021, and I'm going to just highlight a few of the items that are currently in progress or nearing completion. The records management project is well underway, and it'll take a significant amount of staff time from Cindy and Joanne and Tanya to be completed this year. The purchasing policy and delegation bylaw is a coordinated project, and that will be fully implemented when the bylaw is adopted. Between now and April 12th meeting, staff will be reviewing and revising the procedures regarding purchasing practices and agreement approvals. The cemetery bylaw has also taken a fair amount of staff time to date, excuse me, and was presented to council for consideration at this meeting. I do have another update for Chamberlain Park. The 10 property owners that were part of the original land sale bylaw have seen another delay in the process. The closed walkway that was included with the subdivision consolidation plan did not have the road dedication canceled back when the road was originally closed in 1985. Therefore, we've had to request land titles to raise title for the walkway before we can proceed. And we don't expect to hear their decision before the end of this month. So on goes the journey. Lastly, the video system is set to be installed next week, and we'll be using the following week to fine-tune things before the April 12th meeting. And those are all the highlights I have.
Thank you, Brenda. Any questions? There you go. Councillor Parslow.
So the video system.
Mm-hmm.
So that will enable me to see council when I'm calling remote from a remote center?
Yes.
And there'll be a two-way viewing, right?
Yeah, there'll be cameras up on either side, so it will be better viewing than we currently have.
Right. So any further upgrades? I'm wondering about the voting and the voting screen and all that. Is that part of the video, or is that yet to come?
Yeah, through your worship, the subscription for the voting portion of the project is going to be installed at the same time as the video cameras.
Ooh.
Pretty exciting.
So will it have yes, no, and abstain?
Well, there is no abstain. You can abstain by leaving the room. If you're here,
Well, I know that an abstention is counted as a yes, but I mean, you know, it's symbolic. So the long-term contract policy.
Yes.
No, not that. We've talked about that already. The agreements, staff has spent a considerable amount of time working with the general manager of community services regarding the 5 management leases. So they are Lakota, Historical, K-PAC, MOPS, and Curling. Is that correct?
Art gallery, did you say that? Art society?
No, I left them out. So I have one too many.
The Historical Society, that is not included in those calculations with the 5.
So is that an omission on your behalf or Ross's behalf?
be finance.
I'm sure it's a joint effort.
No, I mean, it's a serious question. Are you working on the Historical Society one?
That one's not in the queue at this point.
Okay, because it's not expired? Is that a fair assumption?
I'd have to look into that one.
Through your worship, I believe that is the case. Everything that is dated or stale dated at this time, we've made reference to this morning.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for Brenda? Thank you, Brenda.
You're welcome.
And our next item, 15.4, we have a report from the City Recreation Manager through Community Services. Good morning, Shantae. Welcome.
Counsel, welcome. Thank you for having me.
Just got to do one thing here. There you are.
There.
Good morning, welcome.
Good, thank you. Your worship and members of council. So I'm here to do the community service summary. I'll just go within this community service umbrella. Me as the recreation manager. I follow on with the recreation team, and we do recreation events and programming. Work with all the facility users, arena, parks, pool, and sports fields, special events applications, engagement activities with users, cleanup campaign, recreation social media, recreation registration system, social committee, as well as assist with trade fair. So that's what I'll be reporting on. So COVID implications right now, the Recreation Department meets monthly with the BCRP and RFABC to look at where we are in the province with the return to sport. And right now we're in phase 2 with VIA Sports, which means we're with skills development for youth, low intensity fitness, recreation preschool and youth programs following guidelines with our COVID safety protocols. And right now we do not have any adult teams going on because they are suspended. So that's all the hockey and all of the volleyball. So they are currently working with VIA Sport, is working on a phase between phase 2 and phase 3 at return to sport, and we're hoping that we'll get a little bit more information in the next month. As you're probably aware, that some of the updates are that we can do sport activities outdoors with up to 10 adults, and we have to maintain physical distancing. The department will continue to meet with outdoor sports groups to figure out how we're going to move forward in the spring with sport activities. Right now it will be skill development, and the implications within COVID right now were arena rentals, pool revenue, and recreation revenues as they are down. Operational strategies will be one of the highlights I'll talk about. Key projects this year will be transitioning from the Legend to the Perfect Mind platform. It is expected to take about 6 months to implement from the one program to the next program. We'll have significant staff training and support will be committed to the project. We're also working on the current fees and charges policy under review. This process identified the number of hours booked within each facility, the number of users, and associated revenue, expenditures, which are direct and indirect, and amortization, in order to determine the cost of the services. This process is informed through the policy, which is the user fees and charges for public provided parks and recreation services. Some of the capital projects that we'll be assisting on the recreation side of the department will be assisting with the free grant applications and community engagement aspects for the projects. Communication is very, very important, so we're very thankful to work with the facility side in recreation as well as the grant writer. One of the programs that we do want to highlight is the continued support with the School District of 59 with the after-school sport and art initiative program, which runs 3 days a week. We have about 10 participants come for each day, and they have to rotate through 40 children that are part of that program, so we can do 30 of those children. They continue on rotating. And again, as I said, we do 2 art days and 1 sport day. And this of special note, we continue to work with Public Good within Canada Event Centre using the facility for recreation programs such as yoga, archery, mini sports, roaming rascals, ball hockey. And we're very thankful for this space, which is in Encana, the school district, and city facilities to host numerous of our programs. One of the other things I just wanted to kind of share today is we opened up our swimming lessons through this morning, 8 o'clock, online. Within 45 minutes, we had sold out of 120 swim lessons for the month of April. So our aquatic coordinator is very proactive. She's already working to see if we can find a few more staff to continue on because there's limited swimming lessons, and within 45 minutes, 120 are gone. They're $30 a pop, so. And another thing that we just wanted to share too, the eco counter was installed in the Kin Park, and Aaron is one of the people that they worked with Devon Arrow's staff. And as of Saturday, we already had 65 people walking the trail on Saturday and 105 on Sunday. So Aaron can find out what that information, how many people are using the trail. And the goal for this is that the Trans-Canada Trail Agreement is the goal to snapshot the Great Trail usage across Canada over the next year. So I just highlighted a few things instead of going through the whole thing. I was supposed to be short and talk slow.
Well, you accomplished one of them.
Oh, I thought I was slow. With my mask on too, I was pretty proud I didn't have to
We can hardly even
hyperventilate.
tell you we're talking fast, Shanti.
Well, at least
Thank you.
hope you could understand me.
So, Councillor Parslow.
Thank you. I'm going to say something nice. It's nice to see you, Shante.
Thank you,
See
Councillor
you at the
Parslow.
swimming pool one day when you swim, right? There are 3 questions. Very interesting reports. Let's deal with one, beach volleyball.
Yep.
We have a beach volleyball court already at Rotary Lake. Throughout the years, occasionally, people say we want it, and then sand is put in and it's raked, and then it's not used. So I'm just wondering if there's not a need for a new one, but for this group of people to use the one we have, and it may need some sprucing up. Mm-hmm. So were you aware there was one down there? Okay.
Yeah.
So were you advocating for a second one?
What the group had come and we had a conversation, and they're looking at having 2 side by side, and they're trying to figure out
Two
where.
what?
2 side by side.
Yes.
And they're looking at the location. It could be down there, it could be in another location. So they're trying to figure out how they can fund it and prepare them and upgrade them, whatever they're going to do with the 2 of them. And so once they get a proposal ready, they'll come to Mayor and Council to let you guys know and get your approval or your input. But I can have a conversation with Aaron, and Aaron did discuss that there was one down there, but it does need some work.
Yes, and maintenance, yeah. The second thing, tennis courts. Can you paint a picture of what that's going to look like, the refurbished or revitalized or expanded facility there?
So with working with Urban Systems, as well as downstairs and our facility manager, we are looking at, if we get the grant for $250,000, it will be expanded. The idea will be to have on, and we work also with Ross Ravalli, the idea will be to work on the right-hand side. If you're looking from the parking lot, there will be 4 pickleball courts that will take 1 tennis court, and they will be at a competitive level, and they'll have fencing in between. The next part will be 3 tennis courts. We'll move further west, and those tennis courts will have 2 of them will be either tennis or pickleball, and the 3rd court will be a multi-use one which will have volleyball, tennis, and pickleball. And then we'll move to the final one, which will be basketball, which will be a 3-on-3, 1 for each side, so you could have families working in there with a higher fence. But again, this is just in the vision of where it's at right now. We are hoping once we find the funding, that we would be able to do community engagement. We've worked with the pickleball club, and we've reached out to a couple people who play tennis. So we'll be reaching out and having more information to confirm that with what we have the funding.
Some of the questions I've been asked about the pickleball is this complex going to be covered?
It's an outdoor facility,
It's
and it will
not
be
going to have a
fenced.
shelter?
At this point, within the funding, we'd have to find more funding if they did decide to, if that was the direction that council wanted to go.
Yeah. And third question, the arena sports floor at the Encana Event Centre. I'm just wondering about accessibility. Will there be a cost for groups to use that flooring that will be put down? Because I know that people are saying, you know, that some uses, and I'm just drawing from distant memory here, it's so costly. Is it going to be free? Or are they going to be charging for the use?
There would be a charge through it, but I'm working with our general manager as well as Encana and the facilities manager as well. So once we get to that point, there would need to be a fee for it. It would not, the expectation would not to be free.
Yeah,
and I don't know if Ross would like to add more to it.
Will it be affordable for groups? That's my question. Anything to go into the event centre there, I just wonder about the price.
So at present time, we charge $60 and $80 an hour for dry floor rental. And we'd have to review at our facility, which is the Kin Arena Memorial Arena.
Right.
So we would have to look into that. And like I said, I probably should defer that to our general manager. He probably has more in depth of where he's planning on going with that.
Yeah, my reflections, that better be covered off before you buy the thing.
Ross?
Thank you, Your Worship. We have already initiated some conversations with folks from the Encana and from volleyball as an example. As we move forward, we'll have to explore the cost, the business case, the cost of the floor, the cost of installation, removal. You know, we'll have to look at an allocation policy, which is in a building that is operated by somebody else, and then arrive at a fees and charges structure that doesn't preclude somebody from using that building. So many questions still before we move forward.
Yeah, and I think honestly, our fees and charges bylaw and our policy around how we arrive at a fee for the operating of a facility, and then if it's youth group or dry, and then that's all was in there. I don't think we ever had it in the bylaw, and I would be mistaken as under the Encana Event Center to have that built into those fees and charges. It'd be something we'd have to review under that, I would assume. Thank you for that. Councillor Earl.
Thank you, Your Worship, and hello, Shante. Thank you for your report. I just want to make one note or one suggestion, or I guess question, suggestion, depending on what the answer is. With respect to the community cleanup, I'm the city's appointed person for that, and over the last couple years through my other job at Lakeview Credit Union, I've taken part in it. One thing we've done as a business is we sign up a team of volunteers, but we donate the stipend to a local nonprofit. And I think that's been something that the staff takes a lot of pride in and gives a value add. I'm just wondering this year as we roll it out, if it's possible to, I don't know if you want to create some challenge where you're challenging other businesses to do it, but as a means of inducing businesses, not just nonprofits that are looking to raise money, but businesses to sign up, to make it known to them that they can dedicate their stipend to a nonprofit in town and help them out through that means.
Through Your Worship and Council, and thank you, Councillor Earl. One of the things is that we're open to almost anything when we work with the groups. One of the things we want to make sure that we continue is if there is 60 nonprofit groups that are looking to raise funds, that we are giving them that opportunity to raise funds. And if there is an opportunity, for sure, we have opened that up, opened the door for that as well. So we just need to work with them, because if the nonprofit groups are planning, there's approximately 60 of them, and they are trying to raise that amount of money for their group, we would like to make sure that we support them as well.
Okay. Thank you, Shante. Thank you. Anything further for council? Thank you.
I got off easy,
Appreciate
thank you.
you coming in this morning. Our next presentation this morning, 15.6, we have a report from our Water Resource Manager through Development Services. My printed agenda is different, but
I've got Melina here.
my agenda is different. Anyway, so welcome, Melina. Good to have you here.
For your worship, good morning, Mayor and council members. Thank you for having me this morning. It is my first time, so please bear with me. With our parks in preparation for the upcoming season, our Parks Department is currently working on reviewing and updating our playground equipment inspection forms. We are also working on a black knot tree inspection program. This includes, we've applied for a grant through Shell Canada for $2,500. The grant would help cover cost of staff and the pesticide to mitigate the problem. We've also awarded our hanging basket tender to Willow Valley Landscaping for 3 years. This starts in 2022. So we have one for this year, and it's the end of our 2020, our end of our 3-year term. Facilities is extremely busy right now. We are addressing several security problems throughout the city. One was with the Kiwanis Performing Arts Center, and we installed new outdoor lights. That's to help towards the where the children play, as well as the back end of where their garage is. We're also working with Deltec in upgrading all the city's building security cameras, and that's also to help with our security issue. And understanding the volume of buildings that we have in the facility maintenance department that we take care of, we have moved to a 7-day operation program, which we're hoping will improve productivity within our department and allocation of work. Due to the COVID restrictions from 2020, we had a significant amount of capital carryover, as well as the new projects that were approved, so it makes it for an extremely busy year for me this year. On February 25th, we suffered a major brine leak, which caused the memorial and the curling rinks plant system to go down. Due to the quick reaction from Regan King, our arena foreman, K&O Electric, and Zwick's Plumbing and Heating, we were able to save both ice surfaces. The pool is fully on fixed program. If you're not aware, that we have a program that we started last year that would help. It's a maintenance software program that helps us sort of catalog all of our maintenance jobs that we have, assign them to the correct worker, and get them completed. The pool was our last facility to get on board with this. It is now fully on board. We're also working at the pool to get on our capital projects. This includes new lockers for the change rooms, mechanical upgrades to our circulation pumps, and we've also just closed an RFQ for the flooring in the lobby area, and staff are working on assigning that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? One thing kind of sparked my interest, and it's on the Ken Bork Aquatic Center, and it says on your final paragraph that upgrades to circulation pumps and replacement of water fountains with the water fill stations. Is there any issue with that in relation to kind of public access to, with COVID and the pandemic, with respect to access to public drinking water like that for?
So it has, we do have them closed off right now, the water fountains, because they're just fountain by putting, like drinking, and we can't, even though we tried to put it originally as bottles only, unfortunately, we couldn't mitigate the amount of people using it to drink right from it. So we do have them on order, and we're going to, as soon as they get in, we're going to replacement. You can imagine with a lot of facilities going to these bottled water ones, they're back ordered currently. So we're trying to get them in. As soon as we get them in, this is something we're not going to wait for shutdown. It'll be on a Sunday morning, and we'll start replacing them as soon as we can.
Good. Awesome. Thanks, Melina.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you here.
Thanks.
15:06, we have a report from the Water Resource Manager. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome.
How is everyone?
We're good. How are you today?
Oh, very well. Thank you
Good.
for having us here. So the information in front of you it starts on the conceptual of the projects that we have for the upcoming year, essentially this year. We have the second phase for the control network upgrades, which is the second phase to our first part that we finished last fall. It has to do with our SCADA control system and our immediate infrastructure safety for the integrity for the water and sewer division. The Bear Hole Lake Weir erosion and fish ladder has been an ongoing project, which was been a little bit more complex because the team has had to really look into a lot of the environmental legislation. A lot of the rules have changed in the immediate future, but what's good is the watershed group has really pulled it together the last 6 to 8 months, doing a lot of the footwork and groundwork and making that come to fruition for this fall. We have the water treatment plant upgrades. There's two parts to that. It's the adds clarifier as well as the actual Volte bypass. The Volte bypass primarily is so that we always have consistent raw water flow coming into the plant itself, so that we always have security and control. The adds clarifier, that is more specified to the security of the water quality, so that we always want to make sure that our water quality is on the forefront. We always have the integrity of our full system for volume, but we also have to make sure that we're doing our best in diligence to have our quality of water. I know probably a lot of these numbers seem like runoff when we have our treated water qualities and then we have our water usages. Even when we're showing the usages that, say, Pouce Coupe utilizes on a monthly basis, but I thought to give it a little bit more perspective. For the treated water monthly usage of the 153,000 cubes, to give a perspective, that's 40 million gallons of water. It is not a small amount of usage that we provide to our community, and that's including the Pouce region. Now, when we break it down to a daily usage, for example, so the city of Dawson Creek and its constituents use roughly between 5,600 cubes, and in the summer months it can be as much as 7,800, which is quite considerable. Whereas the town of Pouce will use 5,600 cubes for a month. So what we provide in the stabilization that we here provide for the city and the town members is pretty wonderful, actually. And it also goes into our water sales usages. So again, the total provided water quality and the volumes associated breaks down into the residential, commercial, non-potable, and private industry from our water sales. We've had some pretty good wins for the last 2 months. It's been pretty busy considering it seems like a wash from January to February, and now we're into March. But in the operations side, we implemented an asset performance plan, which what it does is it helps us manage the ongoing maintenance of our larger assets like our pumps and our facilities in general. We also utilize the FIX system, which across the board in all departments is a communication base for tracking, essentially. But what this has allowed us to do is to monitor the inner workings of our pumps. For example, sometimes when we have maintenance or if we have to replace one, it can be in the range of $40,000 to $80,000. This plan in the last 2 months has already saved us about $25,000. So in an effort in itself, it has actually proven to be pretty amazing for us. So that's a good security and a nice feather in the cap for the team that put all that together. So some other ones, we've been working in collaboration with Northern Lights College because we want to bring the Cross Connection program back to fruition. Cross Connection program is it's multifaceted. It's in our facilities and it's part of the water and sewer division, and it helps to maintain some certifications for our industry and for our markets and other vendors that we have in our local city. We had a program before, but now we're actually coming full circle, which is good. So we'll be able to have the education as well as the actual ongoing program. And with speaking with Northern Lights College, it's pretty wonderful because other municipalities are eager and happy that they will be coming here. So it's pretty, I don't know, I think it's pretty awesome. Probably awesome isn't the right word in this platform, but.
Cool.
Yeah. And the watershed team, again, they had the OCP and bylaw amendments. They were approved. They were able to participate with both residential and the real estate professionals on an open floor format. I believe Kevin was also part of that, but they were able to actually receive some feedback and answer any questions pertaining to any changes that we were putting in place. They were also awarded the grant funding for the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, which is for the 102nd Street crossing. They also, recently in February, we have a newest member to the watershed team. Well, Miss Giovanni Kayla is our watershed technician, but she's recently on mat leave, so she just had her son.
Oh, nice.
So Leo has been born, so I thought it was worth noting. And overall, I think it should be noted too that all of the departments and all of the teams across the board and the leadership have done a really wonderful job in maintaining our COVID safety and awareness for the whole team. And I feel like we've been really flexible in understanding with that, and it touches a lot of our individuals, it touches a lot of our team, and it's a big piece that everyone has had to absorb for the year, so pretty proud of that as well. But pretty much that's my overall synopsis. Did anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Nicole. Questions, Councillor Parslow?
Nicole, thank you for introducing to me a new word. So there's a word in your report that I had to look up, and I'm going to try to incorporate it in my vocabulary. The word is appurtenance. I've heard of impertinence, but appurtenance is, so that's, thank you. So this award here for the 102nd crossing replacement, what was that award for particularly? What aspect of that?
So, and Kevin can probably speak more to this because he was more heavily involved, but to the best of my knowledge, it has more in depth for the planning and the associated costs associated with that, so we'd have a long-term emergency response as a community.
Yeah, okay.
For flood mitigation.
Third question is, how long have you been doing this job?
This job, I guess, 8 months now, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
We were trying to get her for 18 months, but 8 actually.
Well, there's a win. I'm
Councillor,
here.
That's great. Councillor Dover.
Thank you. Thanks, Nicole.
Of
The report was great. I just wanted to thank you for taking the time. We did the tour,
Oh,
I guess it was
of
a month
course.
ago. It was, living here my whole life, I didn't know what went into that, so it was pretty eye-opening to see everything. But it was also refreshing on how, like, the whole team works together there, and, like, the cross-training, and, like, I don't know, I live and breathe a lot of that stuff, so it was just really refreshing to see that being implemented in, you know, in a facility like that. So I just wanted to say good job.
Oh,
it was
thank
nice
you.
And thank you. So.
I can't take any of the credit. The team is wonderful. I walked into a great organization, and the collaboration between all departments too is seamless, and we're really proud of that. To be fair, and it's unfortunate that COVID has taken away that opportunity because we've had tours. We like to involve students. We've talked to some degree to, because the Watershed Group has part of their diligence is reaching out to community events. Some of the other municipalities, like say, I believe Metro Vancouver, they had a media application where they did almost a field trip for students, and they used their water treatment plant, and they used other facilities of that nature. And we looked into some of those pieces to see if we could, but it tends to be quite costly, unfortunately. But other parts of that, there's Water Week coming up, and I know that the Watershed Group is looking at other opportunities to reach out to the community and the schools so they can continue to have that, connection. So, but we really appreciated having you, and it was wonderful. We love encompassing everyone and bringing them into the world, because sometimes we feel like we're just on a hill.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One on the truck waste facility, and so we had, is that kind of normalized now in terms of our reporting and getting good response and support from the haulers into the facility and all of that?
Oh, yes. I have to say, hands down, we've seen an enorming, my vocabulary is awesome today. We have had an overwhelming support from our vendors in the community. They've offered even to do retrofits to their own truck when we were transitioning into the more, I would say, structured plan that we've been going on with our manifesting and the communication that we've imposed with our partners in this industry. And since then, we've also done some additional monitoring on our own, and that seems to have really stabilized, and it's been a blessing. The team, it's nice because they now have built that relationship as well with the vendors, so they don't just call me directly. I like it when they interact with the operators themselves and get a real feel for one industry over the other, just because you have to have that balance of understanding and that respect for each other's industries, right? So.
Thank you. The watershed you mentioned, so two things. I really would like to, hopefully this year at some point, to be able to arrange a tour of Bear Hole. We hear a lot about that, the headwaters of the Kiskatnaw, and how important that is to our supply.
Yes.
And so I know that I would be really interested to be able to hopefully at some point this summer perhaps get to a tour of Bear Hole Lake with Counsel, and be able to see the fish ladder and to see all the weir and the dynamics of that facility if we can.
Of course. They make 2 main trips annually, but then they're constantly going monthly, essentially, for doing assessments and water releases that they just actually recently did a couple weeks ago. So that would be wonderful, and I know they would be eager because they too are, they live and breathe it, right? That's one thing that it's really nice to see, is they're very passionate about what they do and how they believe in what they do. So that would be wonderful, and I know they would welcome it as well.
Be very informative, I think, for all of us if we could do that. And on that point, on the release, the capacity of Kiskatnaw, we've been in really strong shape over the last 2 years, I think, at least, of the flow at the Kiskatnaw, and it's always been at weir or above weir, and reservoirs, I think, my understanding of supply is
consistent
at capacity, and for the most part of all of them. What does the Kiskatnaw River look like from this year early now?
Well, for this year, we're still waiting on some additional results because we haven't had as much of a, say, I know we like winter, but we don't like winter, on an environmental standpoint for going into freshet, which is the spring thawing of everything. We would have wanted some more snow, so that's how that impacts directly to the Kiskatnaw. And you're correct, in the last 10 years, we haven't had a considerable drought season, but we've had plus or minus, and it's really dependent on the environment at the time. With having the security with the Bear Hole, for example, in the event that we were in a drought season, that's really impactful for us because it allows us to have additional release of water into the Kiskatnaw, then we can continue drawing on our stability. But again, it's all an assessment of how freshet turns out, and then in the spring session.
Yeah. Groundwater seems like to me, and I get this from the Peace Wilson Advisory Committee through BC Hydro, and it seems like groundwater is still really strong and lots of capacity in the ground itself, in that water table. So it'll just be interesting to see this year what kind of a year we have. But supply is strong so far. So
no, and we're in a very good position. It's just there's other things to always to keep in mind. When we have a winter like we have, and then freshet comes along, you have to remember that a lot of the sediment rolls into the Kiskatnaw as part of that. So the draw substantially decreases from our point of view because there's a lot of sediments, a lot of silts, and then that also settles into our reservoirs. So we try to mitigate that as best we can. Sure. So that also is part of that time frame between now and spring.
Sure. And my final question on the reclaim facility, I saw it was real strong in January and dropped in February. And so are we hearing anything at all from Shell in terms of their request for the year, in terms of what they see for demand on the reclaim? 3,900 cubes, I think it was, on average for January per day was, that's near capacity on an average day. And
yes.
so that's a real good test for the facility. And and it seems like it's operating strong, but are we getting that sense from Shell that they're going to be looking for strong supply this year?
I wouldn't want to make any assumptions on Shell because they haven't spoken to that effect yet of their yearly planning. They keep in contact with me as far as when the month is coming up on a new month. This previous month in February, they didn't have as much demand because they were doing some own maintenance on their own line. But primarily, I would, if it was my professional opinion, that they're maintaining from their winter through their spring shut-off, it would be consistent for us. Other than that, I wouldn't see. But like you said, to their demand, it's 3,900 cubes a day is still pretty consistent.
Yeah. Good. Thanks, Nicole. Anything further, Council? Nicole, thank you.
Thank you.
Good to have you here today. Thank you. 15.7, we have a report from the Public Works Manager through Development Services. That's disappointing. But we're ecstatic to have you here with us, Kevin.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning, through your worship. Yes, Devin unfortunately couldn't attend this morning as he had to be home with his little one. So, but I know he's watching virtually. So, so I'll just touch on a couple quick things. The sanitary sewer trunk main inspection, so that is just about completing. I think they've got, it's either today or the next couple days, they'll wrap that up. Just preliminary, they've told us a few things. There's some areas of the trunk that's cleaner than we thought it would be, and there's others that are areas that are worse off than we thought. So they'll be putting together a comprehensive report with the sonar, with some video and a number of things, and then once we have that, we'll be able to put a plan together for cleaning and moving that forward. I guess really the other thing is we've just recently hired 2 individuals out at Public Works. We've got a new storekeeper, Nicole Reed. She's in there and doing well. And we just, as of last week, hired an apprentice mechanic to replace a vacancy we had. So that's happening. And last week we were steaming and filling potholes as recent yesterday. Today we're plowing snow, and later this week we'll be steaming and doing potholes. That's spring in a nutshell. It changes day by day and minute by minute. I think they are calling for another 5 to 10 centimeters of snow tomorrow evening and into Wednesday. So we'll do what we need to do. This time of year, really, yes, it will melt, but we have to ensure that it melts and doesn't affect anybody during that melt. So we'll plow and do our things accordingly. So I'll leave it there. Any questions?
Thanks, Kevin. Questions? Councillor Parslow?
So do you have any sense about the degree of flow impedance in that sanitary main? I mean, you say some were cleaner, some were...
So we had some sections that were clean, 100% clean, which is good. And we have other areas that we saw 50%. So, and I haven't got the details on how wide-ranging that either is, to the extents, but, and everything in between. So, and then we've also found an area that there was obviously a problem with the pipe because they couldn't get through. So there's a spot we need to repair. So we've got a few issues which we completely expected through this process.
So the work to correct that will happen in the summer?
Yes. So ideally, I mean, as soon as they give us the information, we'll put a tender together and get that out as soon as we can to do the work. I suspect that work will occur likely later June and into July, and the reason I say that is because we need to actually get through the wet season in order to do the work, because the flows will be too high in the main just on a daily basis. So we do need drier weather for the ease of the project.
So will the people doing this work be able to give you some recommendations to prevent that blockage buildup? I mean, can they track source or reasons for why some would be clear and others would be blocked 50%?
Yeah. So I think when we get that report, I have some assumptions, and then we'll see if it proves out. But I think what what I saw initially is we have, some of this trunk main goes through gravel areas. And what happens is that gravel finds its way by a lid getting knocked off during a grading process, or there's different ways. And I think each subsequent storm that we've had has in turn brought more material into that trunk main. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's going to point to a few things, and we're going to be able to develop some strategies on how to prevent it. And I think ultimately, we're just going to have to put this into probably a cyclical maintenance program where every 5 to 10 years we have to do this. But it would be a lesser degree because if we stay on top of it.
My last question, if I may. Ken, has there been any thought of using this technology with our storm sewers system?
So the challenge,
Because I'm just drawing on from previous comments you have made about gravel in that system and.
So the challenge with the sonar is you need to have a flow, a consistent, well, not consistent, but you need to have a flow in the pipe so this will work correctly. Storm sewers don't have flow if it's not raining, and if it's raining, it might have too much. So to be able to coordinate that would be rather difficult.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Kevin. Anything further? I think it's really encouraging to me. I really do like the idea of this work that's underway and see it as a really important kind of component for us to, you're always thinking about, oh, we got to replace this, or it's all capital. But to me, I think this identifies where it's, how beneficial could it be to improve the capacity of what exists in there today and make sure we make every use and the benefit of every bit of that capacity.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good stuff. I look forward to the report, and I think that's a good, important piece for us to build into it. And I don't know whether it kind of doesn't fit into capital. It is operational, but I sure think it's worth that we have that discussion as an ongoing area for our budget discussions in terms of how we deal with it. Thanks, Kevin.
Yes, thank you.
And 15.8, we have a report from the building inspector. Good morning, Bill. Welcome. Let me just get to, there you go. Welcome.
Thanks. I'll be presenting the Committee of the Whole report for Development and Regulatory Services. So basically our department is bylaw, building, planning, engineering, and GIS. So Kelsey and Catherine and our watershed coordinator and Kelsey had, regarding the 102nd Avenue crossing, submitted a grant application to the Investing in Canada infrastructure program for resilience and disaster mitigation. That grant opportunity is 100% funded and, if successful, would fund the estimated $5.9 million needed for the project. It's expected we should hear something about that grant this month or in April. To my understanding, we didn't hear anything as of last week. Moving on to the building department, I took part in a 2-day leadership and management training course last month. It was offered by a gentleman named Paul Bailey and arranged by Devon in Public Works. I believe there was 15 middle management staff and supervisory roles that took part in that. So a great 2-day course, learned a lot about communication, coaching, and teamwork. A lot of tools to take away from that, but with any tool, it takes a lot of practice in honing and developing those skills. A bit of an update on our projects that are happening in town. The BC housing project is near completion. Myself and Rob, our fire prevention officer, were there last week for a monitoring visit regarding the sprinkler system. We had no concerns there. They're pretty much wrapped up, so this afternoon we're actually going there for final inspection. They have their fire alarm verifications done, and we'll be waiting for completion schedules for that project. With that said, once we issue occupancy, the building is complete, and there's accessibility for the occupants of the building and emergency services, that being fire department, BC ambulance, and police department. The civil works aren't completed just because it was built in the winter, so they're waiting for the frost to come out. They'll be getting stormwater management in place. They have some underwater stormwater detention tanks to install, paving, and that sort of thing. So they'll be completing that in the spring and summer. An update on Staybridge Hotel. Spoke with the contractor this morning. They're looking at starting the framing process in the next couple weeks. So that's all I have on that. Lordco, they did curtail operations in the fall just because of the weather. They didn't seem, it wasn't feasible for them to put in a temporary parking lot to rip it out in the spring and then do all the civil work again. So they'll be firing up in May at some point and completing that through the spring and summer. Moving on to bylaw. So bylaws continued to respond to complaints and do sidewalk checks with the snow we've been getting still. One thing to note, they assisted the RCMP after locating a vehicle full of guns and drugs. So bylaws basically, we receive complaints and then act on those. So they got a complaint about a vehicle not moving. When they attended the scene, something didn't look right to them. They reached out to the RCMP, and then RCMP did their work, found doing a safety check when they moved the vehicle, found drugs and guns in there. So it kind of highlights the relationship that our bylaw department and the RCMP have working with one another. It's great to see that, and it's really great to see, getting a vehicle with drugs and guns off the road, right? Bit of an update with engineering and our 2021 capital projects. With this report in February, they were working on those designs, but as of last week, those designs have been completed and they're under review right now. So they should go to tender once they have all the quantities and that figured out, going to tender this Friday or early next week. Just to recap on some of those projects, there's 10th Street behind the hospital between 110th and 112th. So last year the stormwater was upgraded, but the road needed to be replaced and there wasn't time to do it, so that'll be done this year. There's 10th Street North between 92nd and 94th Avenue. 13th Street between 102nd and Alaska, right behind us basically. A side note with that project, we will be coordinating with emergency services to make sure that they have access during that construction phase, because they're right on 13th Street there. 15th Street between Alaska and 97th Street will be completed. That project was started last year. We'll be tying that in this year. And then 17th Street from 89th to McQueen's, the 210 Road, which it's named now. So, regards to planning, had some inquiries regarding temporary use permits, some rezoning, so you should see something coming to next council regarding that. Our GIS, Pierre's working on basically updating all our 20 projects from last year, our capital projects, into the GIS mapping. So what that does, it's a good tool for public works, development services as well, to look at the map and see what's underground. It gives us up-to-date information on that. It also helps us plan our future capital projects as well. So yeah, that's about all I have to say. Any questions?
Thank you, Bill. Any questions? Councillor Parslow.
I enjoyed listening to your report. That's good.
Thanks.
Engineering. What engineering goes out from the city? I mean, we have an engineering capacity, right? Mm-hmm. So what's the point at which we have to procure engineering from external sources? What sort of projects would you take outside?
Kevin?
Yeah, so through your worship, so we have limited capacity, obviously, so we try and do what we can in-house, and we traditionally always have. We've lost one of our engineers last fall, in Kevin Swales. So we have Kelsey, who's performing or completing some of the designs that we do. And typically in-house we'll do water, sewer, road work. Once we get into facilities like water treatment plants, reservoirs, that always has traditionally gone out to consultant work. But now that we're down to just one individual down there, we are sending some more of that engineering work out to consultants to complete. So this year with our roads program, we're probably 50-50, let's say. We're half in-house and half outside. Some of the sewer work that we'll be contemplating as we move forward with the sewer master plan, that will likely be consultants, but we'll see what comes of that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for Bill? So two things I want to just very quickly. One, through this every 2-week meeting with BC Housing and talking about the project, and so the Horizon North is the prime contractor as well as BC Housing were extremely complimentary of our engineering department at City of Dawson Creek, and building inspector. So I wanted to make sure that you guys from that heard that today. We said most communities could take a lesson from the City of Dawson Creek in terms of what a great job your staff have done in helping us with this project, and right from the get-go, from permitting and all of the work and ongoing. So I really appreciated that, and it was obviously good feedback for us to hear. The other one that we talked a little bit about earlier is we're going to have the 8th Street construction begin shortly, and we were going to have the highways come in. But I'm wondering if we shouldn't be starting to get a proactive move towards a plan for traffic and start to communicate that out into the community and on our social media as well as our website to say, look, for heavy equipment, to get that signage out there with the contractor as well as the ministry, but also for local traffic to try to start to say, look, if you're going down 13th Street, 15th, whatever, just so we can proactively kind of put a plan together for folks to say, if you're coming to the community, you're going to hit a bottleneck at 8th Street. We are going to have a bottleneck there, and if we could put a little communication to there, and maybe use Pierre's kind of mapping stuff and to be able to do that, just as a thought.
Yeah,
Bill, thanks for coming in this morning. It was good to have you here.
Appreciate it, guys.
And so with that, we will have a motion to recess to our closed, and resolution under agenda items 3.1 and 4.1, which are section 90 minutes. Agenda item 6.1 is a proposal reland, section 90.1E, acquisition, disposition, and expropriation of land. Item 7.1 is section 92B, consideration of information held in confidence. Agenda item 8.1, negotiation, section 91K. Agenda item 9.1, lease agreements, is section 91D. And agenda item 9.2 is section 90.1E, the acquisition disposition. So if we can have a motion to recess to close, please. Councillor Parslow moved. Second, Councillor Kemp. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. So we'll take a lunch break and go into closed, and thank you. Pull ourselves back to order on our regular meeting of Council with the Committee of the Whole. Unfortunately, today we've had a couple of issues with our technology and Zoom, and our 1 o'clock delegation that was going to give us an update from Urban Matters on the final housing needs report that was commissioned in partnership with the Peace River Regional District. Unfortunately, Matt from Urban Systems won't be able to join us, and so, but we do have the report as part of our agenda today, and so it's important we need to get that approved and adopted by Council to get it back to the RD for the reporting to the funder for, and I think through the Union of BC Municipalities. So we'll move back to reports. Item 7.1, report number 21041 from the General Manager of Development Services regarding our final needs housing report. Councillor Parslow.
I'd like to move that report 21-041 from the General Manager of Development Services, the final housing needs report be received. Further, the staff be directed to notify the Peace River Regional District that the housing report has been received by the City of Dawson Creek and authorize them to publish it on their website in accordance with the section 585.31 and the 585.4 of the Local Government Act.
Thank you. Second, Councillor Dover. Thank you. Discussion? For me, honestly, this report has been, we've been 2 or 3 years in the making to get our housing needs report completed, and it's such an important piece of identifying what that needs is for our community. And I know, I think it was 3 or 4 or 5 years ago that Council took the position that as we developed this, that even we would allocate and dedicate property in the city towards that future need of housing for seniors, for affordable, for whatever. And so now we have this will be the first piece to me in us moving forward in the community to the province, to BC Housing, to and with our seniors, to be able to start to develop that process of getting housing underway and much needed, especially for our seniors and other segments. So ecstatic that we have it, and now we can begin to move that forward. And appreciate all the work that's gone into getting us here today. Administration, anything for you guys to add? Blair?
Your Worship, nothing. It's obviously a very in-depth report. I think I encourage people to read it. I think it'll catch people by surprise. I had a different vision, and I'm, certainly think that our aging in place and our seniors would be our priority. This sheds a little different light on that. So I think it is certainly a report that will engage in discussion. People will over its content. We'll go from there.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. And I know Nick was very involved in this as well and getting it to the stage. Ready for the question? Councillor Parslow, go ahead.
Could staff quickly summarise for me the emergency shelter provisions in the community? I was surprised with one of the comments made in the Dawson Creek about Buttress House being part of the emergency shelter capacity. So that was news to me that it was so I wondered what other emergency shelter provisions there are. I mean, St. Mark's Centre, is that still part of the emergency shelter? No?
Your Worship, that is one we would need the author to do.
Yeah, okay.
Again, Buttress House is not an emergency shelter by any means. There are things in here, and again, they did their work, they reached out. There's another comment that we have youth allegedly living in the forests around Dawson Creek. It jumps out at me as something of a concern when I read that. We don't know for sure, but allegedly, this is our report. So.
I think the definition of emergency, first of all, perhaps somebody who's in a health emergency and here for acute care facilities, maybe it falls within that definition of emergency, but that'd be a stretch to me that it would be emergency shelter. The Buttress House and the patient accommodation it was designed for wasn't at all part of that decision to build it. And certainly the youth living in our parks and et cetera, and of course of summertime, there's always people living in the parks. We know that, but Blair?
Your Worship, we've moved a motion here today to allow the regional district to release this and go public. It may be worthwhile, if council would wish, is to try and have this report presented again by the author at our next meeting to be able to answer questions that council may have.
Yeah, I for sure was anticipating that we would have that Urban Matters give that report, because council have got a bunch of questions, and I think it's important that we have that discussion with them as they develop the data and information.
All right, we'll work on that.
Councillor Earl?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would appreciate that. I would like, I'm prepared to, as you said, for the sake of us being able to further engage with BC Housing, move this along. I do have some questions, and although I understand the need for providing this report, I do think future reports would benefit from broadening the scope of stakeholders. I understand they made an effort to reach out, but there may be an imbalance there with respect to, I don't see any realtors, I don't see any, and I think, they're part of the conversation. I found it very interesting reading. Certainly, another piece, and I guess this is more directed towards the person, or I guess the RD, if they're going to be the ones we're commissioning the report through moving forward, is given that this year is going to be a census year, and the information, and much of the information in the report is already almost 5 years out of date. By the time we get the next report in 5 years, which we're mandated to do, we're going to be working on, the information is going to be 10 years old. So I just, that would be a piece of feedback I guess I would ask you to bring back to the RD as they look at the timing for commissioning this report, if there is a way to hold off for a year so that the people producing it can give us information that's current as opposed to 4 or 5 years. We've gone through a pretty tumultuous upheaval in that 5 years, and my worry is that the needs have changed in that 5 years, and they're not going to be accurately reflected in this.
Yeah, we joined in with the RD because the funding came through the Union of BC Municipalities, so rather than us do it, we partnered with the RD for the report, and along with, I think, Taylor, or Hudson Hope, not sure if Chetwynd, the regional district DEB. So it was a benefit to us on the funding part of it, but it certainly took a lot longer than, for me, that I anticipated. So we're not waiting, from my view, we're going to start to move ahead. This was what we needed to do in order to start to move forward with the province and housing initiatives. Councillor Parslow.
Yes, just for staff to know where I'm drawing this, page 96 of 99, Baltris House is a positive addition to the community. Agree. Then, providing support to the emergency shelter. That's the part that was a puzzle to me.
Yeah, we'll have those
But
questions.
I'm all in favour of the motion.
Yeah.
Let's
Sure,
use this
for sure.
material, yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments, council? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Administration, anything further for you? No? Thank you. My computer talking to me. And no further business? Motion, sorry? Sorry. No further business, then we'll have a motion to adjourn. Councillor Parslow?
Yes.
Second, Councillor Dober, thank you. Just so you know I'm not ignoring you. And all those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Administration, thank you. Staff, it was good. And it was good to see the senior managers in the organization, and today at Committee of the Whole, I thought it was really positive to see those folks in, and it was good. Blair?
Just following up on that, it's a new approach that we will bring, and I want to say thank you to my senior team.
Yeah.
I think it certainly speaks volumes to the quality of people we have and the quality of managers we have, and to have their presence in front of council at the COW meetings, I think is important. So.
Please pass on honestly, I thought they all did a really great job. It was really good to see them here, and good part of development.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.